I'm John Berman alongside Allison Camerata. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. So after 3 days, 7 hours and 12 seconds or so on this roller coaster, very soon the United States is very likely to have a new president-elect.
As Joe Biden's lead over President Trump continues to grow in the key states of Pennsylvania and Georgia, so do his chances of claiming victory by the end of today. Biden is pushing unity and patience, while President Trump is defiant and his legal team vows to, quote, keep playing until the whistle blows.
So right now, but maybe not for much longer, Joe Biden sits at 253 electoral votes. President Trump has 213. Biden is potentially one state away from the magic number, and that's where we begin with the CNN Key Race Alert. So these are the states we are watching this morning. Let's start with Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden holds a 28,000 vote lead. Why is this state so important? 20 electoral votes. If Joe Biden wins Pennsylvania, he wins the presidency. And what you need to know, there are tens of thousands of votes left to be counted, most in very Democratic areas. We will be getting new votes over the next couple hours from Pennsylvania. In the state of Georgia, Joe Biden has a 7,000 vote lead, very close there. 16 electoral votes up for grabs. Biden's lead there has grown overnight. We are expecting more vote from Georgia, perhaps soon. There will be a recount there, no matter what. The state of Arizona next. 11 electoral votes up for grabs. Joe Biden's lead has been shrinking. Right now, he's at about 29,000. There are well over 100,000 votes left. President Trump needs about 60% of the remaining votes to take the lead. Lately, he has not been getting that margin as the votes have been coming in. Nevada, 6 electoral votes up for grabs. Joe Biden, 22,000 votes ahead. Most of the remaining vote there, again, from largely Democratic areas. Anything could happen, but you get a sense of the trends in that state. We will get more vote from Nevada later this morning. Overall, this is where things stand. Joe Biden has 253 electoral votes. President Trump has 213. The states there on that map on white, the states where they are still counting, and we will bring you updates as soon as we get them throughout the morning. Let's walk over to Phil Mattingly at the Magic Wall to find out exactly where things stand. Phil, I do want to start with Pennsylvania. Yep. Why? Because Pennsylvania could put Joe Biden over the top soon, maybe as soon as this morning, depending on what kind of vote we get. Tell us what and where those votes are coming from.
Look, the reality is this. Pennsylvania is key, and Pennsylvania has been heading in Joe Biden's direction now for a couple of days. It's been the reason why Joe Biden has erased a nearly 600,000 vote deficit in this state, now leading 28,833 votes. So the big question is, what's outstanding and where will that vote go? Well, let's start with where the vote is outstanding. Just shy of about 90,000 votes right now, and a good chunk of them come in here. You'll notice it's blue. It is the Democratic stronghold. It is southeastern Pennsylvania. It is anchored by Philadelphia, where Joe Biden has regularly been putting up big margins. How big are the margins? Well, if you just dig in on Philadelphia, look right there, 80.8% to 18.3%. And for Biden, the vote that's been coming in has been even bigger than that. Mail-in ballots, which Democrats have been winning rather handily in the state, his margin has been somewhere between 86 and 88%. In other words, the vast majority of what comes in from Philadelphia has been going Biden's way, giving him a major advantage. The outskirts pushing into the suburbs of those collar counties, also outstanding votes, also going heavily to Joe Biden. Another Democratic stronghold, just shy of 30,000 votes outstanding, Pittsburgh, Allegheny County. We've seen those votes come in. They have gone big for Joe Biden. You look at the margin when you pull it out, a bit of a closer margin here, 59.2% to 39.3%. But here's the reality. The mail-in ballots, what's being counted right now in Allegheny County? They've been going anywhere from 75 to 77% for Joe Biden. It's why the trend lines are all pointing in one direction. It's why the Biden campaign feels comfortable that this will end up in their column. The state of Pennsylvania, the state that can put them over 270. The question is when and what is the full universe of the outstanding ballots as we go into these final days of counting.
Again, just to reiterate what you're saying, the Philadelphia area over there, the Pittsburgh area over here, tens of thousands of votes left. We do know that, and those have been very Democratic leading, disproportionately so even beyond their vote totals. Now, one of the things that has been unknown, and this has been a little bit of a discussion point since yesterday afternoon, is the provisional ballots. Right. We don't know exactly how many are left to count statewide. Sometimes we're getting different numbers from different counties, 80,000 plus. I want to switch to Georgia to talk about provisional votes if I can, because we have some sense of how they've been behaving nationally from vote that came in overnight from Georgia. You can see Joe Biden has padded his lead. It's now 7,000. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it was 4,000 when I went to bed for an hour and a half at about 9 o'clock. It went up to 7,000. That's because some vote that came in largely from Fulton County, which was provisional. Explain.
And it's a good example. Look, provisional ballots, obviously, they're usually counted last, and they come if you, say, showed up at a polling place and you'd moved. It wasn't your exact polling place. You didn't have the proper identification. So when they are counted, how they go through, one of the big outstanding questions, both in Pennsylvania and in Georgia with the outstanding provisional ballots right now, is how are they going to go? Are they going to track with what we've seen from where they're located over the course of the count up to that point? And Fulton County, while not necessarily directly analogous with Pennsylvania, gives you a bit of an example. What we talk to people on the ground think will happen in Pennsylvania, happening in Georgia right now. Overnight, the provisional ballots coming in from Fulton County went heavily towards Joe Biden. Why? Well, look at the margin, 72.6% to 26.2%. So when the outstanding question is, how are provisional ballots going to go? Are they going to lean one way or the other? Right now, what we've seen a little bit in Pennsylvania. We've definitely seen it here in Fulton County at about 3:30 a.m. when I came in. It was a nice little surprise to get 3,000 votes in, they are tracking mostly with the margins from whichever county of which they originated.
Now, it may mean they're not tracking disproportionately to Joe Biden, but they're not tracking disproportionately against either. So in Fulton, which was a Biden county, it meant that he padded his vote. Let's go back, if we can, one more time to Pennsylvania, because that is where we expect to learn the most, maybe over the next few hours. Explain also in these Trump counties, and Trump has won many of these counties by a lot, the late arriving vote, actually the early arriving vote, the mail-in vote has still been skewing toward Joe Biden.
And I think this is the most important point. You talk about the strongholds. You talk about everything that you see blue in here coming in big for Joe Biden. It's not just that's coming in big for Joe Biden. You pull up one of President Trump's strongest counties, Westmoreland County, back in 2016. This county basically made the entirety of his margin in this state. That's how powerful he is in this county. In this county, over the course of the last 48 hours, probably 36 hours, that margin has dropped from 69.6% to 63.6%. Why? Well, just because it's a red county doesn't mean there aren't Democratic voters here. How are Democrats voting? Largely vote by mail. How are Republicans voting? In person. What was counted first? In person. President Trump ran up huge margins when the early vote was counted. Now that the mail vote is coming in, Joe Biden, regardless of where they are, red county or blue county, is hitting big margins and actually winning batches of votes coming out of these conservative counties.
Joe Biden is widening his lead with every vote dump nearly that comes in. We are expecting more over the next several hours. Phil, we'll come back to you as soon as we get more information. Allison?
Guys, thank you very much. So if Biden captures Pennsylvania's 20 electoral votes today, that would clinch the election. CNN's Alexandra Field is live in Pittsburgh for us. So what's the status there, Alexandra? How many votes left to be counted?
Yes, look, certainly the pressure is on, Allison. You've got a relatively smaller number of votes left to be counted now, under 90,000. Phil walked you through where they are. The fact of the matter is this, and it might be slightly unwelcome news on a Saturday morning. We do know that we're going to get more returns later this morning, but officials in both Philadelphia and in Pittsburgh, here in Allegheny County, are warning us that the rate of the returns might actually slow down at this point. And that is because the outstanding ballots are what they dubbed the most difficult ballots to deal with. These are ballots that all have to be reviewed by hand. Here in Allegheny County at 9 a.m., they're going to start that process up once again. They're dealing today largely with a pool of about 29,000 ballots that were incorrectly sent out. Those ballots were then reissued, so the correct ballots were then sent out to voters. But this return board, which was sworn in by the chief executive of the county yesterday, has to go through each of these ballots by hand to make sure that there are no duplicates. They've got to make sure there aren't any other errors. This is a process that will take a bit of time, so they're going to report these results as quickly as they have them, but this isn't the same thing as just opening up an envelope, taking a ballot out of a security sleeve, unfolding it, and just putting it through a machine. It's more labor-intensive than that. We are hearing something similar in Philadelphia, where they've been working on 20 to 25,000 ballots overnight. These are ballots that could include an error, something like a signature in the wrong place or an envelope with the wrong barcode. These are also ballots that have to be examined and prepared by hand. We should then then get some of these returns later this morning. So again, we can't tell you how quickly this will happen, but you've got officials across the state who are saying it is so paramount right now to exercise some patience. They are trying to show us, we are trying to convey to all of you exactly how the process works. It is important, of course, to protect the process, the integrity of the process in any election. It is particularly important this year to also defend the integrity of the process. And that's because the election has been coming under fire with baseless claims made by the White House for months now. Efforts to claim widespread voter fraud without any evidence of it. The governor here in Pennsylvania, the Secretary of State here in Pennsylvania have continued to say they have seen no evidence of problems. This is just how the process works. Despite that, you've got Republicans in the state who have called on the governor to implement an immediate audit while the counting is still ongoing in order to bolster confidence in the election process. Democrats here have continued to say you don't need to bolster confidence in the election process. There has been no evidence of a problem. But if anyone is questioning, if anyone has any confidence about the problem, you would have to draw that line right to the president, who has been making an attempt to discredit this election before it ever started. John, Allison?
Alex, thank you for all of that. It sounds painstaking, and obviously so much gratitude to the counters who are going through it piece by piece. We'll check back with you, of course, throughout the program. Yeah, quickly.
Yeah, just wanted to tell you, this is a process that is happening in the open. We were able to observe it yesterday. We'll be able to observe it again today. We could see the ballots being counted. You had poll watchers from both campaigns watching, and even cameras in the building.
I really appreciate you making that point, Alex, because obviously that is one of the lawsuits, or certainly that's one of the complaints on the Republican side. So we'll get into that as well. We'll talk to you very soon for an update. Meanwhile, the Trump campaign already launching legal challenges in court. So let's bring in Jessica Huseman, who may be able to hear me. Jessica? Hi.
Yes, hi.
Okay, good. We're just parachuting you in right now to talk about these lawsuits.
Sorry.
No problem. You're a reporter for ProPublica. Let's tick through some of these lawsuits, okay? And you can tell us which ones have merit. Let's start with Pennsylvania, okay? So where we just were, where we just got that report from Alex. First is that postmark battle, okay? So ballots that are postmarked by Election Day, we know, can still be counted in Pennsylvania for 3 days. That deadline has expired yesterday. I thought the Supreme Court already ruled on this. Why are we still fighting this one in court?
I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know that anything will happen with this lawsuit. The ballots that the Trump campaign is convinced are going to come in for them have already been taken care of by this lawsuit. It's not an open question anymore. I think that the Trump campaign is really throwing out lawsuits just so that they have something to talk about when they go on the news for the next couple of days. This is really sort of a covering their area move. I don't know that anything is going to come, especially in Pennsylvania, out of these lawsuits.
Well, I have a couple more in Pennsylvania, and that's one that Alex just ended her report with. The Trump spokespeople, I don't know if they're actually officially on his campaign, but I've heard some on other networks talking about how they're very upset that they're not getting observers. Alex says they are getting observers, but some observers were moved, I think at the behest of the Trump campaign, from 10 feet away to 6 feet away to better eyeball the situation. So are we good now?
I mean, I think that we were always good. They have always had observers in the places where observers are located. The Democrats did not get a better view than they did. They were not 6 feet away while the Republicans were kept 10 or 25 feet away. They have always had a viewpoint into the counting and into the voting. So again, I think that this is just a lawsuit to file a lawsuit.
So just to be clear, outside of Pennsylvania as well, we're talking in Nevada, we're talking in Arizona, observers are allowed, and it's all equal distant between Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely the case. I mean, you know, poll watching has been a thing in the United States since the 1800s. This is incredibly well regulated. Every single state has a very specific set of laws. All poll workers are trained to work with poll watchers in the exact same way. And so I think that there's really no basis to claim that Democrats were given a bigger advantage or Republicans were prevented from observing the polls. That's simply not the case. It has never been the case.
There are legal challenges in lots of states from the Trump side, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada. But in some of these, judges have already heard them, and they seem to be kind of dismissing them out of hand. So let's move on to recounts, okay? So Georgia's is definite, right? That's happening. Georgia will be recounting. And what about the other states?
You know, I think that there could be a couple of other states that come within recount territory. But I think if you look historically at the recounts that have happened during presidential elections, they really don't move the needle that much. We're talking about 100, 150 votes here or there. Certainly not enough to turn around the margins that we're seeing coming out of Georgia and Pennsylvania and Nevada. And so I think that we might have to be patient and wait for some recounts. But again, I don't anticipate that bucks the trend that we're seeing across the country today.
How long do those normally take, those recounts?
It depends on the state. In some states they can do these recounts in a couple of days. In other states it takes a week or more. I think that this year we're probably looking at, just because of all of the new mail-in votes and all of the paper that we have, we're looking at a little bit of a different recount process. You know, I think that there have been a lot of people for many years saying that we need paper backups for all of our votes. Well, we've got that more than ever this year. And so we will at least know the recounts are as high quality as they have ever been. I do anticipate, though, that in some states they'll take several days.
Jessica Huseman, thank you very much for all of your reporting and all of this information. It is super helpful. All right, let's go back to John.
All right, Nelson, one key thing about recounts, historically and traditionally, they can change tens of votes, hundreds of votes maximum, not thousands. And that's where we are right now. Other major news overnight. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows tests positive for coronavirus. Officials there tell us he has been all over the White House since Election Day. We have new details on what's happening behind the scenes. Next. Welcome back to CNN's special live coverage. Let's look at where things stand in Nevada and Arizona. In Nevada, with 6 electoral votes up for grabs, Joe Biden leads by 22,000 votes. What you need to know about the remaining vote, more than 100,000 ballots. Most of it comes from Democratic-leaning areas. Joe Biden has been growing his lead when these ballots are counted. Arizona, a little bit of a different story. Joe Biden leads there by 29,000 votes, 11 electoral votes up for grabs. Most of the remaining vote here, over 100,000, it's been mixed. Donald Trump has been leading in the vote as it comes back, but Republicans will tell you he needs to get about 60% of the remaining vote. He hasn't been getting quite that much. We are watching that come in very closely. If Joe Biden were to win both of these states, it would be enough to give him the election. Overall, let's take one last look at the map at where things stand. Right now, Joe Biden has 253 electoral votes. Donald Trump has 213. The states in white are the states we're watching. We could get more votes over the next few hours. Allison?
Okay, John. Meanwhile, the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, has tested positive for coronavirus. In the past week, Meadows has been traveling with the president and his family to campaign stops and election events all over the country. He has not been seen wearing a mask. CNN's Ryan Nobles live at the White House. So what are they saying this morning, Ryan?
Well, Allison, this is just another example of the stark reality that still exists in this country as we wait for these election results to play out. The coronavirus pandemic remains a serious threat in this country as the cases rise, including right behind me here in the White House. Mark Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, testing positive for the coronavirus. This after being seen all week in many public events with a number of staffers close by, inside, with Meadows not wearing a mask. He was here at the White House on election night for what was supposed to be the election night victory party for President Trump. And he was also with the president that morning when he traveled to Arlington to be at the Trump headquarters. Right now, the White House not providing too much information about exactly, who Mark Meadows was in contact with, saying that they have been contact tracing. But we're told, sources telling our Jim Acosta, that Mark Meadows was actually asking staffers to keep his diagnosis a secret so that it wouldn't become a big story. That's obviously not what happened, Allison.
Brian, when is the last time we saw President Trump, and what does he have on his schedule today?
Well, the last time we saw President Trump was when he came out and spoke as the election results were still coming in and made a number of baseless claims about the election supposedly being stolen from him. That was the last time we saw him in person. Of course, his Twitter feed has been very active, but as of today, there are no public events on the president's schedule, and that is very rare. It is unlike him to go this many days without being seen in public, make some sort of a statement. There are no plans right now for the president to come out and speak to reporters or speak to the public in any way, shape, or form. Not even just a campaign event, perhaps some sort of an event that shows him still governing. He is, of course, still president of the United States. We'll, of course, see if that changes, Allison. Of course, the former Vice President Joe Biden had the last word when he gave a speech last night. It's not like President Trump to go very long with letting a political opponent have the last word. So perhaps we'll see the president in some way, shape, or form today. But as of right now, there are no plans for that to happen. Allison.
Anything can change on a dime, as we know. Ryan, thank you very much for all of that reporting from the White House. So up next, former VP Biden calls for calm as President Trump threatens a long legal battle. We'll discuss where we go from here.
Welcome back to CNN's special live coverage. John Berman here along with Allison Camerata. And by this morning, really, by this presidential race, President Trump is promising that his legal proceedings have just begun. Joe Biden is urging calm and promising to be a president for all Americans. Let's bring in CNN political commentator Errol Lewis, as well as CNN national political reporter Maeve Reston. Maeve, I want to start with you. Joe Biden gave a speech last night. The former vice president is trying to begin the process, I think, of looking forward and imagining what happens once and if he becomes president-elect. What did you see?
Well, I think it's been really fascinating over the last couple of days to watch the way in which Joe Biden is trying to take the temperature of the country down. I mean, he came out last night in a purple tie. He has been talking about how there are no red or blue states, that he'll be a president for all people. And I think that, you know, he talked about having a mandate last night, but I think that that is still very much in question, given the fact that we are seeing these incredibly close margins in these states, and that one challenge that he's going to have is that Donald Trump was, in fact, able to turn out a lot of those so-called hidden Trump voters that we were also skeptical of, and turn out a lot of his people. And so I think that in order to succeed here, to the extent that he can, if he is in fact president-elect, Joe Biden's really going to have to think about a more pragmatic agenda that's going to address a lot of the economic uncertainty that we saw reflected in this election. We expected it to be the COVID election, and to some extent it was, but it also was a reflection of the deep economic uncertainty in this country. And you saw that in particular in states like Nevada, where Biden could have potentially done a lot better if people weren't as worried about what the economy is going to look like as this pandemic continues, John.
Errol, I'm just curious about this process, because let's just say that Pennsylvania's numbers come in today. Let's say that we can call it for Biden, and President Trump doesn't concede, and he never concedes. Then what? How does Biden move forward? I mean, this is more than a nicety. The concession call is more than a nicety. It's a trigger, right?
Well, do you know what the Constitution says about concession phone calls?
Nothing.
Exactly.
I know. How dare the
exactly
founding
nothing.
fathers?
Well, no, the point is it has absolutely no legal or official role whatsoever.
But then when is the starting gate? I mean, when's the starting bell in that case, Errol?
Right. Well, it's interesting that the former vice president is waiting for media organizations to essentially dictate when he can step forward, publicly start organizing his transition, and otherwise try to put things in order. The reality is, yeah, he's waiting on other people. President Trump is not going to be one of those people. I mean, it would make absolutely no sense to wait for the Trump campaign and the Trump administration to decide that they're going to drop their legal arguments, drop their political arguments, and declare that the game is over. On the other hand, allowing media organizations to do that puts Joe Biden in a tricky position as well. We know that he wanted to get a declaration yesterday and start moving forward. Well, that didn't happen. And if you look at what the Associated Press and other news organizations are doing, they're going to wait. You know, I mean, it takes Georgia off the map in some ways until there's a recount. News organizations aren't going to declare anything definitively, I don't think. And there are a number of other kind of forms of uncertainty that could really cloud his ability to move forward. On the other hand, look, I think we all see where this is heading. We understand that the Electoral College count at some point could, in fact, if a certain number of states line up for Joe Biden in a way that is unimpeachable, then yes, he will be declared by one or another major news organization. He'll then pick that up, he'll start his transition, and we'll all move forward. I mean, whether or not the Trump folks want to sort of sink into a morass of conspiracy theories and complain to their dying days that they were kept too many feet away from the vote counting process in Philadelphia, that's up to them. But the country clearly is ready to move forward, Allison.
One sign that the apparatus of government is working independently from the political operation inside the White House is the Secret Service, which is already treating Joe Biden differently than they did before Election Day. They have increased the security around him substantially. And the traditional transition apparatus will, in all likelihood, kick into gear once things become clear, regardless of the lawsuits. The lawsuits will play out how they're going to play out, but it will not keep the business of the country, in all likelihood, from moving, though we have to watch it very closely. Babe, on the issue of mandate and the issue of Joe Biden's behavior, one thing is clear is that Biden is handling this a certain way and reaching out to all parties. He has chosen not to spike the ball. Granted, the game's not over yet. He's chosen not to spike the ball. But one thing I learned from covering George W. Bush in 2000, after he won by 530 votes and 2 electoral votes, is the mandate you get is the mandate you take. I mean, this is a guy who lost the popular vote, barely won the election, and went into the office and passed a huge tax cut that was politically complicated and controversial, passed a huge education bill. You get what you get. You get what you take. So Joe Biden might be able to make a difference no matter what people perceive to be his mandate or otherwise.
I think that's so true, and that's such a good point, John. I do think that remembering those times that we are in a much more divided and polarized America, and we've seen that, play out just in terms of the temperature on both sides. That I think it will be hard going forward for Joe Biden. He is a person who has spent his career, trying to make deals, working across the aisle, putting bipartisanship at the center of his persona and his agenda. But you have a lot of Republicans around the country who are going to look at these margins and think that, they still are beholden to some extent to Donald Trump's popularity around the country. And I think that will make it very hard for Biden to move forward and bring some of those people along. We already saw Brad Parscale, for example, on Twitter when the president was wanting more Republicans to come out and defend him, say, anybody that wants to win in 2024, now's the time to speak up. So I think we will see Trump world continue to try to keep Republicans sort of under their control with those kinds of threats, John.
Errol, what do you think about that? I mean, Joe Biden seems to be built for this moment in terms of he has a history of compromise, sometimes to his detriment, or sometimes he's taken hits for that. And so what do you think about how he plans to move forward?
Well, look, he's built for this moment, but this moment is not going to last, right? I mean, we're only 24 months away from the midterms, Allison. And he's going to have to deliver for the industrial Midwest. If there's a Biden administration, they are going to have to deliver. They're going to have to come through with jobs, with hope, with economic recovery for states that are the worst hit in some cases, like Wisconsin, by the coronavirus pandemic. He's going to have to really produce, and he's going to have to do it quickly. There's going to be a partisan wrangling. There's going to be enormous fights. There is going to be a showdown in the midterms, a short 2 years from now, and then it'll be time to start talking about the reelect. So he's got his hands full. I mean, the states that deliver him this victory, which ones are decreed to be the actual margin of victory, it's going to be very important. But for sure, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, he's going to have to really, these are essentially blue wall / swing states at this point, right? I mean, if you look at the numbers, the fact that it's so close this time means that it is by no means a sure thing that these economically distressed areas are going to simply support Democrats indefinitely. So he's going to have to hit the ground running, really. There's not going to be too much time, I think, for the healing that he talks about before he has to really get down to brass tacks and start delivering for the people who gave him this victory.
I'm not sure that'll be hard for Scranton Joe, for Lunch Pail Joe. Appealing to the people of Pennsylvania may be something that comes, whether it will work, I don't know, but it comes naturally to him. All right, Errol Louis, Maeve Reston, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
In the state of Georgia right now, a razor-thin margin, but relatively speaking, a big change overnight. What it means, next. Welcome back to CNN's special live coverage. We could have a president-elect, sometime this morning. Why? Well, let's take a look at two of the most important states right now. In Pennsylvania, with 20 electoral votes up for grabs, enough if Joe Biden wins it to get the presidency. He leads by 28,000 votes at this hour. There are tens of thousands, potentially 100,000 or more votes left to count. Most of them coming from largely Democratic areas. It's quite likely he will add to his vote total throughout the morning. In the state of Georgia, 16 electoral votes up for grabs. It's razor thin there. A 7,000 vote margin there with Joe Biden in the lead. Not much vote left to count. It's important to note Biden actually grew his lead from 4,000 to 7,000 overnight. There will be a recount there no matter what. Still, Joe Biden's lead is growing. Let's go over to Kristen Holmes at the voting desk to get a sense of what the rules are surrounding recounts. Kristen.
Yeah, John, I mean, I want to say something before we even get into the rules here, which is that in the history of the United States, it is very rare that a recount actually flips an election. Usually you see something like a single-digit number of votes, maybe a couple hundred votes, but the idea that there would be thousands and thousands of votes that would change a presidential election is very, 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 if not completely not possible, but at least very slim. So let's start with the rules in Pennsylvania because we're still within that margin. There is an automatic recount threshold, which we are still in, of 0.5% or less. So let's look at the margin we have right now. Biden is ahead by 29,000-ish votes, so 0.4%. So within that margin. Now, if you talk to Democrats in the state, they say that this margin is going to be way bigger. They're counting those votes still out of Allegheny County, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. But right now, just for the sake of argument, we are still in that margin. We know that it would be a big deal if this went to a recount. Now, Georgia rules. As you said, they're already going to have a recount, but we'll just go through the rules anyway. There is no automatic recount. Candidates can request one if the margin of victory is 0.5% or less. So we go to the margin. Biden is ahead by 7,248 votes, 0.1%, so still in that margin. Again, though, the last two recounts that happened in Georgia, there was no change at all in the actual winner. So something to keep in mind here. John?
Kristen, it's so important. Recounts tend to change dozens of votes, hundreds of votes at the outside, almost never. I can't think of a time where they've changed thousands of votes. That is crucial. Terrific work. Thanks so much for being with us. Allison?
Okay, John, as of this morning, there are less than 20,000 ballots left to count in Georgia. CNN's Nick Valencia is standing by in Atlanta. So, Nick, can we expect the results today?
Well, I would love to be able to tell you that answer, but it is another we'll see this morning. Today, there are those 20,000 overseas provisional military ballots that they're expected to get through. And overnight, as you mentioned, there were some potentially significant developments as Fulton County here in Metro Atlanta got through 5,000 provisional ballots, giving Joe Biden a 7,248 lead in the unofficial tally over President Trump. Yesterday in Gwinnett County, they attempted to get through up to 1,500 provisional ballots, but they had some problems with the Dominion voting machines. They say that caused the delay. They'll try a second attempt at that later today. But remember, because those ballots are provisional, they may not all reflect in the overall tally. The bottom line, as Kristen was just talking about, is there is probably going to be a recount here in Georgia, but not just a recount, also a runoff, and not one, but two Senate races that could hand the power of the Senate to the Democrats if they're able to get those two races in their favor. This is no question about it. Georgia will be the center of the political universe for at least 2 more months. That runoff is scheduled for January 5th, 2021. Allison?
Okay, thank you very much for all of that, Nick. Tell us when anything breaks there. President Trump and his aides have been conspicuously quiet for the past 24 hours. What's going on in the White House? That's next. Joe Joe Biden is leading this morning in the final 4 battleground states. So how is Fox TV, the network that has amplified President Trump's message for 4 years, how are they framing the results? Let's take a look at some of Fox's coverage over the past couple of days.
It seems inevitable that in this initial vote count, that Joe Biden is going to win.
The Trump campaign has said that they wanted to have their poll watchers there, and that I guess they're being asked to provide evidence for something that they say they weren't able to even participate in or to be able to see. And so that's, I think, where they would say that needs to be rectified, if it could be.
That's not true. It's not true. It's just not true. The election poll watchers, they are called canvass watchers. Republicans have been in this room, where they're supposed to be, standing alongside with the Democrats.
When they are talking the fraud issue and they are talking, irregularities, illegalities, what are they specifically referring to?
Neil, I think you're right on target. You see a lot of passion and a lot of anger, but you don't see any specific examples of where was the irregularity.
At this point, the president needs to win at least 3 recounts to even get to 270 or maybe tie it at 269. It's a really tough uphill battle.
To all you patriots who supported President Trump, stand tall and be proud of your efforts and his. It was all worth it. We all helped reshape the national conversation on China, on immigration, on trade, and political correctness, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have time to bury our heads in crying towels.
Let's bring in CNN chief media correspondent Brian Stelter. Brian, wasn't that interesting to see the real reporters, yes, Eric Shawn, Steve Harrigan, have to shoot down the hosts by saying, that's not true. That's simply not true. I mean, they're on the ground, they're doing the real reporting, but you can see the kind of, schizophrenic take on what's happening over there.
I think this is a giant tug of war, and it's so important because President Trump is watching this happen. He's watching TV all day, and tens of millions of American voters have their minds influenced by the coverage on Fox. Fox is in the middle of a giant tug of war right now. 1 minute, Sean Hannity is yelling about voter fraud, but the next minute, Laura Ingraham is talking about the Trump presidency in the past tense. Some of the news anchors have been gently pushing back at these ridiculous voter fraud claims. Others have been letting it slide on the air. I do think on Friday, Allison, we started to see a tone shift at Fox. There was more skepticism toward Trump. And I think Laura Ingraham's commentary last night, where she talked about grace and conceding with grace, that was hugely significant. That was a message directly through the camera to the president. I know it's wild, but we're in this world where these stars on Fox try to communicate to the president through the camera. And that's also happening in print. The Wall Street Journal editorial board, also owned by Rupert Murdoch, is sending the same message right now.
Look, I agree it's all interesting what Fox and the Murdoch empire does, but they don't get to decide who the president is. The American people get to decide who the president is, and the voters get to decide who the president is. And we'll figure out soon enough what the voters want here, maybe even by noon today. I will also tell you, Brian, I think the White House knows which way the voters are leaning right now, how this is going. Why? Because they've disappeared. We haven't seen anybody, really, from inside the White House for more than 24 hours. Why do you think that is?
Well, I called it a tug of war. I think a tug of war is happening in the White House as well. Think about the end of a football game. Think about the end of any sporting event. Sometimes the last minute is the most important. Sometimes the last minute is the only minute you remember. And I think these White House staffers are wondering, how am I going to be remembered? How is this president going to be remembered? And that's been the rhetoric on Fox, by the way. How is your presidency going to be remembered? Yesterday we reported that some staffers at Fox were told to stay away from the term president-elect when Biden crosses the 270 mark. After we reported that here on CNN, there was internal angst about that idea. There was backlash, and then anchors on Fox started to, in hypothetical conversations, refer to Biden as president-elect. This tug of war is happening at Fox and at the White House right now, and it's understandable that some staffers don't want to be caught up in the president's lies on Twitter, his lies about voter fraud. By the way, he has been labeled on Twitter many, many times this week for bogus lies. We've never seen that before. These platforms, these networks are taking a stand right now.
Brian Stelter, please keep us posted. I expect we'll hear more from them over the next several hours. Obviously, the voters will have their say, and as soon as this morning, we might know who the president-elect will be. And the one place that might decide it soonest, Pennsylvania, one region, Allegheny County. We're expecting thousands of votes from there soon. Up next, we'll speak to a key official from there to find out how much vote remaining and when they're going to provide it. Stick around. I'm John Berman alongside Allison Camerata. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. An anxious nation's wait may soon be over. Joe Biden is closing in on the presidential election.
Biden's lead over President Trump continues to grow in key battleground states, and we do expect a new round of counted ballots this morning that could put Biden over the top. But the president is vowing to fight on in court while Biden is urging the nation to come together.
All right, this is the electoral vote count as of this moment. Joe Biden has 253. The president has 213. Joe Biden is potentially one state away from crossing that 270 threshold. That's where we begin with a CNN Key Race Alert. So these are the states that matter this morning. The state of Pennsylvania with 20 electoral votes. Enough votes to give Joe Biden the presidency. He currently leads by 28,000 votes. That number has been growing. Tens of thousands of votes outstanding this morning. We could be getting some of that in. It's coming largely from Democratic areas. His lead is expected to grow. Georgia. We got new votes from Georgia overnight. Joe Biden now leads there by 7,000 votes, 16 electoral votes up for grabs there. This is a razor-thin margin. Again, Joe Biden has been expanding it. There will be a recount in this state. The state of Arizona, 11 electoral votes. This is different. Joe Biden's lead has been shrinking. He leads now by 29,000 votes, well over 100,000 votes left to count. Republicans will tell you that the president needs to win 60% of the remaining vote to win. He hasn't been getting that. So stay tuned. More vote expected from Arizona this morning. Finally, Nevada, 6 electoral votes. Joe Biden leading by 22,000 votes at this moment. Most of the remaining vote, over 100,000 ballots left to count, from Democratic Clark County, which has been padding Joe Biden's margin. Again, we'll hear more from Nevada later this morning. Let's look at where things stand overall at this moment. Joe Biden has 253 electoral votes. Donald Trump has 213. The white states there, the states we still are waiting to hear more from. One state we're watching very closely is Pennsylvania, because with its 20 electoral votes, when we walk over to Phil Mattingly at the Magic Wall, talk to me about Pennsylvania.
Well, look, it's the anchor of the blue wall that Vice President Biden claimed he could reconstruct, and he's almost there. Slowly, steadily, surely, his vote total in the state has been growing, overtaking a nearly 600,000 vote margin from President Trump. And as things currently stand, as the ballots that are outstanding grow fewer and fewer, Joe Biden looks to be on a path to win the state. But it's not done yet. So where is the outstanding vote? This is why Democrats have confidence in the state of Pennsylvania. Look down here. The blue of southeast Pennsylvania. It's anchored by the city of Philadelphia. Philadelphia, if you want to know how things stand right now for Joe Biden, look at this margin. 80.8% to 18.3%, 95% reporting. Our understanding right now is about 20 to 25,000 votes outstanding from Philadelphia. And those votes, they are all mail-in ballots. And mail-in ballots in this county, they have been going 85 to 86% towards Joe Biden. In other words, whatever margin you're looking at now in the top line, it's going to grow just from Pennsylvania alone, or just from Philadelphia alone. And if you push out from the city of Philadelphia into the collar counties, again, Joe Biden racking up vote after vote after vote as those absentee ballots come in. Those absentee ballots are counted. And without fail, those absentee ballots are going largely to Joe Biden. You can even move west in the state and you get to another Democratic stronghold. You get to Allegheny County, you get to the home of Pittsburgh, where about 29,000 votes are left outstanding. Those votes also mail-in ballots. Those votes also going heavily towards Joe Biden. You pull up Allegheny County, and you look at the margin, it's a little bit tighter here than Philadelphia. However, 59.2%, 39.3%. The reality of those mail-in ballots, which Democrats focus so heavily on in the middle of a pandemic, they have been going to Joe Biden in this county at roughly 75 to 77%. So, John, when you look at the outstanding vote right now, at least in terms of mail-in ballots, not just provisionals, but mail-in ballots, Joe Biden is looking mostly at places where he's picking up every single batch that comes in, including the outstanding vote that might come as soon as this morning.
All right, Phil, hang on one second. Leave this up. Yep. Leave Allegheny County up. Why? Because on the phone with us right now, I'm just hearing the county executive from Allegheny County, Rich Fitzgerald. Rich, thank you so much for being with us right now. First of all, thank you for the work you're doing. Please thank all the poll workers for us. Give them a giant hug. If you can you tell us how many ballots you have left to count?
We probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of a little more than 20,000, 22, 23,000, something like that. But not all of those ballots will be good, because some of them may be duplicates. They're going through those today. They're painstaking because they have to be done by hand, so they can match them up to make sure that those votes did not already get counted. But probably, we're probably looking at about 20,000, I think, that would get counted. And in Allegheny County, the mail-in ballots have been running about 80-20, so 80% for Joe Biden, 20% for Donald Trump. So they'll begin that process today in a few hours. And then we have about 17,000 provisional ballots that will be counted. They will probably trend similarly, maybe a little bit less, maybe more like 70, 75 to 25, but those will be counted, probably begin early next week.
All right. That's important information you just gave us, information we didn't have clarity on. 20 to 21,000 mail-in ballots that still need to be counted, although there might be some duplicates because of some certain circumstances that happen in your county. An additional 17,000 provisional votes, so maybe more than 35,000 votes left to count in Allegheny County. Rich, when do you think we'll be getting our next update from you? When do you think you're going to feed us more results?
I would think some point either late this morning or early afternoon. They'll begin this process a little after 9 o'clock, and they'll upload a certain batch. I don't know, maybe a few thousand at a time every few hours, and that's probably almost like what happened yesterday. Last evening, that was similar to how things were going. I think we did one batch of about 5,300, then a batch of about 9,000, and I think our last batch was a little over 3,000.
Hey, Rich, Phil Mattingly here. Again, thanks for all the work you and your folks are doing. I think in terms of timeline over the course of the day, you guys moved pretty quickly over the course of yesterday with the batches that you put out. What's your expectation if you've got a batch moving a couple thousand out this morning, kind of throughout the course of the day? Are you going to do several different releases? How are you kind of mapping that out right now?
I believe that's how they plan on doing it. What I will tell you is, though, the deeper they go into that batch, the slower it will go. They went probably with, I'll call it the easier ones first. And the more you go in, the further down you go in that 29,000, those are the ones that really have to painstakingly be looked at, monitored, checked for the duplicate, checked that it went to the right district. If it didn't go to the right district, then certain parts of the vote would have to be canceled out, like for the state rep or the state senate. It wouldn't affect the presidential, other than the fact that it'll just take a little more time.
Do you have any sense, you said there may be some duplicates. Have you been able to see yet what percentage of duplicate ballots there are? And the reason for this, so people understand, is you had to send 2 rounds out because of an error from a third-party contractor. So you sent 2 rounds of mail-in ballots. What percentage of duplicates are you seeing?
Very few, to be honest with you. So that has been, but they still have to check it. They still have to go through it. So what people would do is they would most likely discard the incorrect ballot that they got and send back the corrected ballot that had a bright orange slash on it, bright orange banner on it, so that they knew. But you still have to go through it, ballot by ballot. Some people did send the wrong ballot, but not very many.
Rich, can you go into, given a lot of the, misconceptions that are out there, or perhaps allegations that are out there that have all been unfounded, can you kind of talk about the access campaigns or parties have to the process that you're going through right now, given the fact that you got to this place because, as John was talking about, with the duplicate ballots? What are the parties, what are the campaigns able to see and do during this process?
they're able to see all of it. They've been there. In fact, your cameras have been there. Other media outlets have been there watching and monitoring the entire system. There are cameras everywhere. Cameras eye in the sky and on the ceilings. Probably as many cameras as you have at a casino or somewhere like that. So it is well documented. It's well viewed by all parties, the Biden party, the Trump party, the Republican and Democratic and Libertarian. I mean, it's visible. So you sit there and you watch these folks as they open the ballot, as they go through the ballot and look at it. So it is very, very transparent. And quite frankly, they've been praised at how transparent it is by all parties involved.
All right, Rich Fitzgerald, we can't thank you enough, again, for the work that you're doing, for the work the poll workers are doing, and for giving us this update, because this is solid information right now that's very helpful to us to understand where things are and where they're going. Terrific work. Thanks so much, Rich.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Phil, can we just do the math here for 1 second? Let's just talk about the mail-in ballot so people know what we're talking about here. He said 20,000 largely, coming in 80%. 80% for Joe Biden at this point. Just so people know, if it's 75% or if it's 66%, it would be 15,000 to 5,000, which would be a 10,000 vote pad.
Yep.
You're going to see a 12,000 vote pad or so by his calculations from Allegheny County alone. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, that's the math. And I think that it underscores, and you're being very conservative there based on what he was saying. And so, again, the name of the game right now is what's outstanding and how can President Trump make up margins. And if he's down by 28,000 votes, the reality of what Rich was just describing, which tracks with what we've seen in mail-in, not just in Allegheny, but kind of across the board, even in some conservative counties, is that there are just such limited options for President Trump to start to pick up vote. Instead, what you're seeing, whether you're in Philadelphia or whether you're in Allegheny County, is opportunities for Vice President Biden to pick up 10, 12, 15,000 votes. And I think it's largely why you see, when you talk to Democrats on the ground there, they predict that by the end of the day or by the end of the count, it's not going to be 28,000 or 35,000. It's going to be 40,000, 50,000, 60,000. And what that means, probably most importantly, is this right here, 0.5%, that's recount territory. You get outside of that, that changes the dynamic, it changes willingness to call races, and that is where things are headed right now.
0.5 is one number to watch, another number to watch. This is 28,000. 44,000 is what, Phil? It's the margin that Donald Trump won Pennsylvania by in 2016. So keep that in mind. We could pass that at some point this morning. Allison?
Okay, we are standing by for all of that. Here to discuss this and so much more is CNN senior legal analyst Laura Coates. She is also a former attorney in the voting rights section at the Justice Department. That seems to come into handy right now, Laura. So you're the perfect person to talk to. In your opinion, from this slew of lawsuits that we've seen come from the Trump campaign, do any have merit? And in particular, the one that Justice Alito has ruled on in terms of those ballots that were postmarked by Election Day in Pennsylvania but received for the 3 days after?
Not a one is going to have any meaningful impact on their election results unless for some reason the margin of victory for the person who is presumed to win Pennsylvania is somehow going to be impacted by the number of segregated ballots, the ones that came in after Election Day until the deadline of Friday. If that narrow opportunity for those particular votes will actually sway the election, then it could have an impact. Otherwise, we're talking about the Supreme Court, Allison, just weighing in to figure out in the long run whether the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court or any state Supreme Court can extend a deadline theoretically when the state legislator said that you could not. That's what they would look at. That's the sort of narrow question the Supreme Court would be looking at, not about who won the election, but whether there was somebody who usurped the authority of the people who were supposed to set the time, manner, and place of elections.
We have heard in our reporting that President Trump is unhappy with his legal team, wants them to be more aggressive or thinks they're unprepared, I think. Do you know what the problem is?
Well, the problem is everyone hates their lawyers when they have no chance of winning because the case just doesn't have the evidentiary support. A lot of what President Trump has been speaking about is the idea of drawing a conclusion and then hoping to work backwards to somehow find an iota of evidence. But when you're talking about election-related matters, you actually have to gather that evidence of whatever fraud you are articulating. actual specific evidence about whether there's a clerical error, whether there's something about the mismanagement of the ballots, whether there's intimidation or other things, those are things you get in real time. It's very hard to go back and try to conjure up or figure out what might have happened after the fact. You can't have a backwards approach. And so if he has none of those, and so far we have seen nothing about that. And also you have a breadth of cases, a breadth of states. Allison, we're focusing, of course, on Pennsylvania because of the very high electoral vote count, but he's having cases in at least 4 different states. And so the amount of financial investment, the amount of legal expertise, and then you also fall short on evidence, this is a huge uphill battle that, frankly, may be too much to overcome.
You need evidence in court. Let me write that down. That's very interesting.
Evidence. E-V-I-D-E-N-C-E.
D-E-N-C. Got that. Thank you. Laura, that is fascinating. What about this, the larger issue, and that is that do these lawsuits and recounts gum up the works somehow in terms of the transition? If Joe Biden wins, does all of this kind of postpone or somehow mess up the transition?
Here's how it could. If for some reason there was this essentially battled electoral count, and you had some instance where perhaps you had 2 different slates of electors who were going to put their electoral college votes to separate candidates, these dueling elections in some sort, it could go to Congress. It could have Congress be the ones to ultimately decide who they're going to accept ballots from, electoral college counts from. That could delay if they somehow miss the deadline by which you have these electors already in place. But realistically, that is something that's down the road and one that you shouldn't focus on yet, and here's why. Because it's all about the numbers. Basic addition is where we are right now, the tabulation, and there is a safe harbor period for each of the states where if they certify their elections in time for a particular deadline, then they can't be legally challenged after that. That's why every single state is racing right now to get to that certification period so they can avoid the idea of maybe even the House having to decide as opposed to electoral college members.
If there's something to worry about on the horizon, I'll start worrying about it, Laura. But thank you very much for explaining all of that and putting it into such great context for us. All right, up next, we are live at Biden headquarters with a look at the thinking inside that campaign and what we may hear from the candidate today. All right, we're told the Biden campaign is working on a potential victory speech as he awaits word that his lead does last in the 4 states that have yet to be called. MJ Lee is live in Wilmington, Delaware. So, MJ, what is that conversation going on inside those headquarters?
Hey, good morning, Allison. Well, it is Saturday and this race is yet to be called. That means the Biden campaign is in a bit of a holding pattern. But when you talk to the Biden campaign and people close to him, they think this is a done deal. They think it's just a matter of time before they get over the 270 threshold. And, you know, when we listened to Biden give his speech here in Wilmington last night, he basically walked right up to the line of declaring victory without just saying those words. He essentially said, look, the numbers do not lie. I believe this race is going to be called for me. He said that he believes he is going to win states like Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, all states where we are still waiting for the counts to be finished. And an important part of that speech was him addressing what is likely going to be one of his biggest challenges if he is in fact elected, and that is bringing the country together. He said there is a clear distinction between his opponents and enemies. Here he is.
We may be opponents, but we're not enemies. We're Americans. No matter who you voted for, I'm certain of one thing. The vast majority of almost 150 million Americans who voted, they want to get the vitriol out of our politics. We're certainly not going to agree on a lot of issues, but at least we can agree to be civil with one another.
Now, even as the campaign is feeling confident that they're going to win, it doesn't mean that there isn't a level of impatience. Biden also said in that speech last night he gets that it's a little numbing to watch the TV rally slowly trickle in. He also said and sort of suggested, and I think this is clear in talking to folks around him, you know, look behind me, there's the stage. It has been set up for a little while. Clearly, this is a campaign that is eager to eventually make that victory speech. I will also finally note one thing the former vice president said is that he wants to get to work even before this race is officially called. And advisors say that one of those things that he will continue to monitor is the COVID-19 pandemic, that regardless of where we are in the vote counting process, this is something he is going to be looking at and monitoring very closely. Allison.
Thank you for all of that. MJ, joining
right.
up. John,
I'm sorry.
you bring them in.
I will bring him in. Joining us now, Margaret Talev, CNN political analyst, as well as politics and White House editor for Axios, and David Gregory, CNN political analyst. David, I want to start with you here. Why? Because, 20 years ago or so, you and I were covering George W. Bush during a recount, which is a much different circumstance. There was uncertainty in that. Right now, there's every reason to think that there won't be uncertainty, that there'll be a fair amount of clarity here. But what is similar is that Joe Biden is doing something we saw George W. Bush do, which is to begin acting like a president right away. And it seems to me this has two purposes. One, it's helpful in this time of electoral uncertainty. It gives people confidence in the voting process, but also it lays the groundwork for what happens if and when you become president-elect. What do you see?
Well, Biden has a unique circumstance that George W. Bush did not at that time, and that is there is a crisis bearing down on the country, or facing the country, which is the pandemic, of course, and the economy. So think about Bill Clinton in 1992, who told Ted Koppel in the wee hours of his victory morning, I'm going to focus like a laser beam on the economy. Biden can do that. He can do it today. He has to do it today because he has to hit the ground running when it comes to fighting the virus and dealing with the economy. The needle that I think George W. Bush was trying to thread at that time was he had a House divided, right? A deeply divided, polarized country. That's what Biden has now. This is not a sweeping mandate, but he is on the cusp of defeating a president after only one term, which is significant. But you remember, John, the advice of Vice President Cheney, which I think is also in the Vice President Biden's ear, which is you move forward fast, you don't pay attention to the division, you start leading. And again, with the pandemic and with the economy, I think Biden can do that in a very fast and a resolute way.
Here's the problem, Margaret. We've got 2 months. If Biden wins, we have 2 months until he's in place or more. And yesterday was the highest number of case count yet, 125,000 people in this country. The chief of staff in the White House, Mark Meadows, has tested positive. He's in a high-risk group, 61-year-old man. And so we can't wait for those 2 months. And that President Trump, we haven't heard from him or seen him in more than 24 hours. He's not tackling this, and it's just getting worse.
Yeah, well, good morning, Allison. Look, I think when you heard from Vice President Biden last night, one of the passages that stuck out to me was when he said that he had a mandate to govern and to begin moving forward. And you can argue whether or not a race this razor thin is a mandate from the Electoral College. Certainly from the popular vote, it will be. But the reason he's doing that is to lay the groundwork for the transition that has to begin immediately. And we already know that he is in conversations on a regular basis with the former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, with folks like David Kessler and Zeke Emanuel, who we know for years dating back to the Clinton administration, that there's an assembly of, a dozen or so folks who are advising him on coronavirus matters. And that is going to be priority number one during what we expect to be a Biden transition shortly forthcoming. And he'll be moving forward, assuming this race is called the way we all expect it to be called in the coming hours or days, moving forward on cabinet appointments and so on and so forth. But it is exactly as you said, that coronavirus that is priority number one, because by the time of an inauguration, we know that the number of deaths potentially, we've seen projections, could have doubled. We know that experts believe that Thanksgiving may be a tipping point, an inflection point for a quick rise in infections and whatever comes with that, and that the pandemic and the problems that have expanded greatly under this administration, the bill that's going to come due by the time of the next inauguration could be significantly higher than it is right now. And the way the two teams work together, if it is a President-elect Biden, will the Trump administration play nice with that transition? Will they do the kind of information sharing, laying the groundwork for a smooth transition of government? Those are real questions at this point.
And that's a critical point. I mean, Allison, I think you're onto it. We don't know what we're in for, but we can imagine with President Trump, which is no peaceful transfer of power in this sense. I don't mean calling for violence. I mean, will he cooperate with the shadow government, with the government that is in transition? Will he block their efforts? Will he have Biden over? Will he confer with him on anything? Will he even go to the inauguration? We don't know any of that, but knowing where President Trump's head appears to be, we can assume that there won't. So we could be a really volatile couple of critical months in fighting the pandemic and, of course, in dealing with the economy.
It's also, I mean, just to build on that for 1 second, it's also hard to imagine. Not only do we not know it, it's just hard to, in your head, imagine that level of cooperation from President Trump after this campaign.
This campaign, after his life.
I mean,
at any point in his life, after, this is just how he behaves. But, the impact.
But I could see people underneath him. I could see people underneath him cooperating unless he actively blocks it. But because there's a lot of levels at which that cooperation happens. But I could certainly see him being an impediment.
There's every reason to believe the apparatus of the government and the transition structure that snaps into place will continue to do so, whatever nonsense you hear from the President of the United States. And the impact on all this is, again, on the American people. We've had more than 1,000 new deaths reported 4 days in a row for the first time in a very long time. There's one issue about the issue of mandate and margins here I think people need to know. Joe Biden is on path to win the same number of electoral votes that Donald Trump won 4 years ago, which Trump himself labeled a massive universal galactic landslide. 306 electoral votes is more than George W. Bush ever got. It's more than Jimmy Carter got. It's a little bit less than Barack Obama got. In terms of the margin in the popular vote, Trump 16, Bush 04, Bush 2000, Carter 76, Nixon 68, and Kennedy 60 all had well less than the 4% or so that Joe Biden has right now that could keep growing. That's in the popular vote there. And you alluded to this before, David. The mandate you have is the mandate you take a lot of the times when you come into office.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. And I think here's another way to underline that. If Biden wins, Trump's a one-term president. It's very difficult to defeat a one-term president. The only thing that I think argues against that is, look, there was a lot of energy. We know it in the media, among pollsters, in the Democratic Party, that they were going to run Trump out of town and this wouldn't be a walloping. It was not. It's a close race in the Electoral College. There may be more distance, and I take your point about the past. We also are on track potentially to have divided government. The Democrats lost House seats. So there's a lot of division in the country. But I don't think that means that as Biden that you tiptoe into office. I think any president stands up and leads and takes the American people with him or her to where the country needs to go. That's what leadership is, and he tries to build consensus. This is a tough political environment to do that, and it has been since 2020, since 2000 when we covered that tight race.
Yep. Margaret Olive, David Gregory, thank you both so much. So it is, 7:30 on the East Coast right now?
I've lost all sense of space and time.
And it is Saturday, just in case you were wondering.
You sure?
Ballot counting has resumed in Pennsylvania. Joe Biden is edging closer to victory. Stand by. We're going to take you to Pennsylvania, and we're going to look at the record-breaking, we've been talking about this, the record-breaking popular vote. No candidate has ever received 74 million votes, or 70 million for that matter. Stay with us. Welcome back to CNN's special live coverage. Let's take a look at two of the states where things are very close this morning. First, the state of Nevada. Joe Biden has a 22,000 vote lead, 6 electoral votes up for grabs, 100,000 plus votes left to count, most of them from Clark County, which has been leading heavily Democratic. Now, the state of Arizona, 11 electoral votes. Joe Biden with a 29,000 vote lead. That vote has been shrinking. Republicans will tell you President Trump needs 60% of the remaining vote, more than 100,000 left, in order to take the lead. He hasn't been getting that. Still, we're watching very closely. Let's go over to Phil Mattingly at the Magic Wall to get a sense of where things stand. And let me preface this by saying what we're about to talk about doesn't matter because of the Constitution and the Founding Fathers, the popular vote, but it has some, I think, moral significance.
Look, I think I'll put it this way. So I spend the vast majority of my time kind of digging into each state, digging into each county. And then every once in a while you look up in the middle of going through Maricopa or Allegheny or Philadelphia or anything else, and you look right here, specifically right here. The popular vote right now, the turnout that we've seen, it started an early vote with surges across the country. And where we currently stand at more than 144 million votes that have been cast, and we are still 8% outstanding. That is going to grow. It's going to grow exponentially over the course of the coming days and weeks as all of the count is finalized. And you also look at Joe Biden's popular vote lead. More than 4.2 million votes. He is currently ahead of President Trump, 50.5% to 47.7%. So just to contextualize it a little bit, you go back in time, go back into 2016, keep 144 million in your head, go back to 2016. Nowhere near that. Nowhere near that. And again, still 8%, 7% outstanding. Go back even to 2012, President Obama versus Mitt Romney, 125 million. Go back to 2008, which was a big turnout, at least for modern era. Still surpassed it enormously. And you look at the top line, go back over to 2020, no individual in the history of the country has gotten more votes than Vice President Biden in a general presidential election. And the other interesting element, no individual in the history of the country, other than Joe Biden, has gotten more votes in a presidential election than President Trump. And it's just, it's this year, it's this moment, it's this willingness to participate that is astounding.
And you know what? Good on him, good on him, good on you. I mean, this was an election where people did come out and participate. I do want to point out this margin here, 4.1 million, it's going to grow. Yes. A lot of the remaining voters from California. Joe Biden has the potential to grow his popular vote lead to north of 5 million, which would be more than even Barack Obama in 2012. Bill Clinton in 1992 was 5.8 million. Not impossible that Joe Biden gets there. So when you think about the size of the victory from a national sense, it could be pretty big. Yeah. It could be pretty big.
No, there's no question about it. And also just one other quick fact to go back to turnout. There is a very, very real possibility that in terms of total percentage turnout, it surpasses the current high in modern era, which is 1960, which was, I think, actually, you know what, real quick, I know we're on time here. 63.8%, 1960, on the path right now to pass that in modern era. We've seen several cycles now where turnout has gone down. Something about 2020, something about everything that's going on in our country and in the world. It's a good thing.
All right, Phil, thank you very much. Go back to crunching the numbers. Up next, how the Republican Party is responding to President Trump's baseless claims of election fraud. We're joined by a former Republican congressman from Pennsylvania next. Welcome back to CNN's special live coverage. They have resumed counting ballots in Philadelphia, in the state of Pennsylvania. This is where things stand there. Joe Biden leads by 28,000 votes, almost 29,000. 20 electoral votes up for grabs. If Joe Biden wins Pennsylvania, he will be the president-elect of the United States. Much of the voting, many of the ballots come from largely Democratic areas. We are waiting for some results over the next several minutes. Allison?
Let's bring in Charlie Dent. He's our CNN political commentator and former congressman from Pennsylvania. Congressman, what's taking so long in your home state?
Hey, Allison, I'll tell you what's taking so long. The reason why this is the first time Pennsylvania ever did absentee voting without excuses. So the volume is enormous because of the pandemic. The legislature passed the law prior to the pandemic, and of course, then there was no authority for the counties to start to count those votes until Election Day. And in Pennsylvania, put it in perspective, there are nearly 13 million residents of Pennsylvania, and there were 3.1 million requests for absentee ballots, and about over 2.5 million were actually returned, and about a 3-to-1 ratio, Democrat to Republican. And so they've been counting. This is the first time they've done it. There's nothing nefarious going on here. It's the first time, and they're getting through it.
Charlie, I just want to point out what we're seeing on the other side of the screen. This is a live shot of the counting that's going on. And I don't want to malign the counters. They are doing God's work, okay? But clearly they're on a break right now. They have not started because the entire room appears to be empty. I know they're tired. They've been at this for days. But it doesn't look like much is happening at this exact moment.
Yeah, well, I tell you, I'm sitting about 3 or 4 blocks from where they're actually counting. I'll go over there and wake them up, I guess. But they're going to get through it. They're going to get through it. And we're down near the end. By the way, Pennsylvania is. You take it to the bank. Joe Biden is going to win Pennsylvania conservatively by at least 50,000 votes. Maybe 100,000. This game is over. It's done, and people just, I know the networks have to be very cautious and conservative about calling it, but I can tell you this outcome is not going to change.
In the meantime, Charlie, supporters of President Trump and his surrogates really are casting aspersions on the counting in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia in particular. Senator Lindsey Graham said Philadelphia's election counting is as crooked as a snake. And in fairness, Philly does have a history of some malfeasance. And so what do you say to all that?
Well, it is true. There have been problems in Philadelphia over the years. I lived it in the 1990s when a state senator was ejected for massive absentee voting fraud in the city of Philadelphia in 1994. I remember it. But the counting that's going on today, it's not just Philadelphia. My home county, Lehigh County, I voted by mail. My vote probably wasn't counted till Thursday. And so all these counties are slower than we'd like because, again, they couldn't start counting until Election Day. And the General Assembly and the governor couldn't reach an agreement. They didn't allow the county workers to start counting prior to the election. They should have given them a week or 10 days. We wouldn't be in this situation had they just planned better. And I think there was a deliberate strategy by some to have this situation where we knew there was going to be that Donald Trump was going to come out at the in-person voting with an advantage, and to watch it evaporate with the absentees. And by the way, the fact that Donald Trump suppressed his own vote by telling voters not to engage in mail-in voting or absentee voting, he harmed his own campaign. It's an act of political stupidity.
But Charlie, so you think that he would have gotten more votes had he encouraged people to mail-in vote? You think that not enough people showed up on Election Day for him?
Well, it may have hurt him. I mean, I just know in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Republicans have historically been better at absentee voting than Democrats. I mean, the Republican State Committee has a very aggressive program. Hell, that's how I voted by absentee. They send me my application, my whole family. They're very good at it. And Donald Trump is out there bad-mouthing mail-in voting, and I think he suppressed his vote. It may have cost him some votes. I don't know. I can't calculate how many, but I think it absolutely hurt Republican candidates up and down the ballot. It was just an act of malpractice. It was stupid. I know there are plenty of Republican leaders in Congress who are mortified when the president went off on this issue of mail-in voting.
Congressman Dent, great to talk to you. Let us know what happens when you walk 3 blocks away and when you figure out what the count is there for us. Give us a call.
I'll crack the whip. It's over. Pennsylvania, Biden won. Okay. Thanks.
You heard it here from Charlie Dent first. Okay, thanks so much, Congressman. Great to talk to you.
Thanks.
Up next, an election worker in Georgia has been forced into hiding after a viral video falsely suggests that he tossed out a ballot. We're live in Atlanta as the vote count there is almost complete. An election worker in Georgia has been forced to go into hiding after a viral video falsely accused him of wrongdoing. CNN's Nick Valencia is live for us in Atlanta. So what happened here, Nick?
Allison, the unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud by President Trump have found a home on social media, and they have turned dangerous for an Atlanta area man. A viral video was posted on Twitter after the Fulton County votes were being processed. It has been viewed millions of times, and it falsely accused this ballot poll or this poll worker of throwing away a ballot. Rick Barron, the elections director here in Fulton County, called the claims, the false accusations, shameful. He said they're flat out dangerous. They have reviewed that video, and it shows a young man working at a ballot cutting station, a ballot machine cutting station, where the outside envelope separates the inside envelope of the mail-in ballot. You do see him at one point crumple up a piece of paper and throw it away. In fact, that piece of paper is not a ballot, but a list of instructions that voters often, or sometimes I should say, return with their absentee mail-in votes. That voter, that poll worker, I should say, is now in hiding. He's not staying at home, but staying with friends, according to Rick Barron. And his personal information, including his driver's license, or his license plate, I should say, is now public. security is being, there are discussions right now to provide him security, but I mentioned, Allison, that it is very dangerous, these false accusations that are floating around the internet right now. Allison.
That's a nightmare, Nick. That is a nightmare. Thank you very much for reporting that.
You bet.
Back to you, John.
All right, they have resumed counting in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. If Joe Biden wins Pennsylvania, he wins the presidency. We are expecting some more results in a few minutes. Stick around. John Berman here alongside Allison Camerata. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. So after 3 days, 5 hours, and about 12 seconds or so on this roller coaster, very soon, the United States is likely to have a new president-elect.
As Joe Biden's lead over President Trump continues to grow in the key states of Pennsylvania and Georgia, so do his chances of claiming victory by the end of today. Former Vice President Biden is pushing unity and patience, while President Trump is defiant and his legal team vows to, quote, keep playing until the whistle blows.
At this moment, Joe Biden sits at 253 electoral votes, the president at 213. Biden is potentially one state away from the magic number, and that's where we begin with a CNN key race alert. These are the states that hang in the balance right now. None more important than Pennsylvania, with 20 electoral votes. In the Commonwealth, Joe Biden leads by nearly 29,000 votes. There's maybe more than 100,000 ballots left to count between mail-in and provisional. Most of it comes from heavily Democratic-leaning areas. Joe Biden has been building his margin there over the last several hours. In Georgia, Joe Biden leads by just 7,000 votes, 16 electoral votes up for grabs. Joe Biden has actually expanded his lead overnight. It went from 4,000 to 7,000 when you were sleeping. Still very much in recount territory. Nevertheless, an area where Joe Biden is expanding. The state of Arizona, a very different story, frankly, with its 11 electoral votes up for grabs. Joe Biden's lead has been shrinking. Right now, he leads by about 29,000 votes. Republicans will tell you, though, that President Trump needs about 60% of the remaining vote in order to overtake Joe Biden. He hasn't been getting that. Still, we expect an update from Arizona later this morning. Finally, Nevada, 6 electoral votes. Joe Biden ahead by 22,000. He has been expanding his lead. What do we know about the remaining vote? Most of it comes from Clark County, which is Democratic. Again, Biden expected in all likelihood to grow his lead in Nevada as the day continues. Let's take a look at the map overall right now. As we sit here this morning, Joe Biden has 253 electoral votes, Donald Trump with 213. The states in white there, many more paths for Joe Biden to get to 270 than Donald Trump. The clearest path, the path where they're still counting and have already started counting this morning, is in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So that's where we'll begin with Phil Mattingly at the magic wall. 20 electoral votes. Joe Biden wins it. He is the president-elect. What are we seeing and where?
It is the biggest outstanding electoral prize, and the Biden campaign is pretty clear. They feel confident about where Pennsylvania is going, that it will end up in their tally soon rather than later. We'll see about that. But I'll tell you why. They look like they're on track, and they don't seem to be wrong when they look through where the vote is actually outstanding. As John said, there's about 100,000 votes, just shy of 100,000 votes, mail-in votes outstanding, and it's how those mail-in ballots have gone and where they are located that does give the confidence to the Biden campaign. As it currently stands, Joe Biden about 29,000 votes ahead of Donald Trump. That is a lead that is a complete reversal from just about 48 hours ago when Donald Trump was ahead by nearly 500,000 votes. So what changed? Well, they started counting mail-in ballots, which they were not allowed to count by state law until after Election Day vote was tallied. Election Day vote went heavy for Republicans, with huge turnout for President Trump. Here's the problem. The mail-in ballots, even bigger for Vice President Biden. And where is still outstanding right now? The biggest strongholds for Democrats, southeastern Pennsylvania, most notably the city of Philadelphia. Still 20 to 25,000 ballots outstanding. And if you take a look at the margin in Philadelphia, it gives you a sense of what may be coming in. Joe Biden at 80.8%, Donald Trump at 18.3%. And here's the thing. when you start to factor in mail-in ballots, the margin is actually higher, sitting between 85 to 88% as new batches come in. You factor that in, you push out into the other blue strongholds here in the collar counties, and you go over to Allegheny. We were just talking to an Allegheny County election official, home of Pittsburgh, said there's about 20,000 mail-in ballots left that they're tallying. He said those were going about 80-20% as well, making very clear that when it just comes to the outstanding mail-in ballots, Joe Biden has a serious advantage, not just in strongholds, but also in conservative counties. Again, going back to the fact that what's left outstanding, mail-in ballots leaning towards Democrat, not just in Philadelphia, not just in Pittsburgh, but even in those ruby red counties that President Trump has turned out his voters. He turned them out on Election Day. The mail-in ballots still leaning Democrat in those Republican strongholds.
We just talked to Rich Fitzgerald, county executive for Allegheny County, who told us about 20,000 mail-in ballots, 17,000 provisionals. I did some of the math based on his calculations. Not impossible for Joe Biden to pad his margin by 20,000 votes in this county alone. Now, Phil, if we can take like 45 seconds to a minute to talk about provisional ballots, because I think this threw some people for a loop starting yesterday afternoon, and maybe part of the reason why there hasn't been an official call yet. There may be 80 to 100,000 provisional ballots left in Pennsylvania. Isn't exactly clear which they will lean. Will they be more like mail ballots? Will they be more like in-person ballots? We have a little bit of a sense from Erie County. Can you explain?
Yeah, we'll pull up Erie right now, and you'll take a look at a margin. This is a county President Trump won in 2016. Joe Biden is on the path to flipping it back in 2020. And we got a sense of where things may go for the rest of the state based on the provisional ballots in Erie County, which have been counted. And those ballots have gone 125 for President Trump, 105 for Joe Biden. So generally, splitting them about half and half, generally coming in line with the margin as it currently stands. Erie is a battleground county. It goes back and forth. And so when you look at what's outstanding in provisionals, Philadelphia has about 20% of what's outstanding. Based on what happened in Erie, what traditionally happens with provisional ballots, you're going to see a pretty similar margin to what each county has. At least that's the expectation based on historical precedent and based on what we're seeing in Erie. So if Erie's splitting about 50-50 in range of what we've been looking at over there, Philadelphia's got about a quarter out, and they're splitting 80-20 at this point in time. Are provisionals going to change the game given where things stand and where things are about to be standing as more of the absentee ballots come in? No. Instead, it's likely the absentee ballots start growing that 28,000 vote lead, 10, 20, maybe 30,000 votes. And provisionals probably net out Joe Biden some votes too.
Yeah, grow it less, but grow it nevertheless. Let's quickly check Georgia for a second, because I think this actually tells a little bit of a similar story. Joe Biden's lead grew in Georgia overnight. It went from 4,000 to 7,000. Not a huge number, but actually a pretty big percentage jump, and every vote counts when it's that close. It came from Fulton County. What types of ballots were they?
Provisionals. They were a mix of a few absentee ballots, which obviously have been going heavily Democratic, but also provisional ballots as well. And why does that matter? Well, you look at the margin here in Fulton County. Again, largest county in the state of Georgia, home of Atlanta, Democratic stronghold, 72.6 to 26.2%. And when you saw the provisional ballots mixed in with a little bit of absentee come in Atlanta, mostly matched up with this margin. Again, sticking with what we were seeing in Erie. Just because they're provisional ballots doesn't mean they're going to all of a sudden move away from what we've seen margin-wise in each of these counties. The counties are the same. Maybe went to the wrong precinct, but the provisional largely lines up with what we've seen on margins. And I will tell you, when you get a batch of 3,000 or 4,000 votes at 3 in the morning and you're standing at the magic wall, it is like Christmas. It is like Christmas. But most importantly, when you pull out and you look at Georgia, as provisionals come in, about 14,000 outstanding right now, some universe of a couple thousand military and overseas votes that were waiting to come in as well. This margin matters a lot.
Yes.
A lot. Going from 4,000 to 7,000 matters a lot because likely, almost certainly going into a recount. And a recount is not a place where you see 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 votes change. That would be a catastrophic failure to a degree on this level you just don't see. So every vote that Joe Biden adds to his total, every vote gives him more of a cushion to whenever that recount happens, the likelihood that Joe Biden holds on to the state of Georgia.
Recounts tend to change dozens votes, maybe hundreds at the tops. I can't think of a time where they've changed thousands. As for Christmas, new ballots, we could get a Keystone Christmas sometime over the next several hours, maybe even minutes. We are expecting more votes from Pennsylvania. They are counting again in Philadelphia. Allison?
Christmas in November. We like it. We'll see what happens over the next couple of hours. Thank you very much, guys. Let's go now to Pennsylvania, where more than 80,000, we're told, mail-in ballots remain to be counted. CNN's Kate Baldwin is in Philadelphia for us this morning. What's the situation, Kate?
Hey there, Allison. It's not a question of whether they're counting right now. It's why is it taking so long to finish? The short answer really is that the group of ballots that they're dealing with here in Philadelphia, that they're working with, they require extra attention. They require more review. What they call them here at the convention center, they call them problem child ballots, and that's what they say. There are about 20,000 of them that they need to be wading through. Overnight, there were 60 workers here in the convention center, we're told, that were prepping these ballots for review. We're told that part of that includes grouping those problem child ballots into buckets, we could call them, to address a specific issue at hand. We are told that they're starting that work, starting that review. They should be started right now if they're keeping with the schedule that they have laid out. They're also looking at 18,000 provisional ballots that they have not gone through yet, and we're told that they're not likely to be going through those until next week, starting with those on Monday. So the entire focus here in this massive cavernous warehouse space that they are working in here in Philadelphia, the entire focus is getting through those some 20,000 mail-in ballots that are requiring extra attention to address issues that could be a range and variety of things. So we are told that there are going to be updates coming today, but how soon and how many, there is not clarity on that quite yet, Allison.
Okay, we will try to get some answers for you and for the viewers and for all of us. Thank you very much, Kate, because joining us now is the Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. Lieutenant Governor, thanks so much. I know it's a busy day. Thank you for being with us.
Sure.
So help us set our expectations. Do you have any sense of when the ballots will all be counted in Pennsylvania?
Well, I mean, the count's ongoing, but there isn't any good news for the president's campaign anywhere in the pockets of votes that remain. Philadelphia is going to drop a big bundle at some point this morning. Allegheny County is going to have some as well, too. And those trend heavily in the vice president's favor. So, my advice to the president's legal team on the ground here in Pennsylvania is not to buy any green bananas, because I don't think this is going to be much longer.
Wow, that does give us a sense of the timeline. Is today the day that Pennsylvania pushes Joe Biden over the top?
I can't say with any certainty, but I quite frankly am unsure why mathematically we're not already there. If you just look at where these votes are coming from and the history of how these votes break, you're talking 75, 80% and higher coming out of Philadelphia. And, even if you give a 50-50 break, that doesn't gain the president any ground. And the vice president's already about 30,000 up. He's going to go up even more when those Philly ballots drop. And I want to emphasize, these are all legal ballots that can't be touched by any Supreme Court decision. And at this point, you have this sad strategy of trying to appeal these so-called late ballots that arrived after election night at 8 p.m. through Friday. And you're talking 2,000, maybe 3,000 votes all across Pennsylvania. It's an inconsequential pot of ballots. And, they had to interrupt Samuel Alito's Friday night for that kind of a ruling. I mean, that, I think, really exemplifies their desperation. And I would just urge them to just accept math.
I mean, there's more than just those sequestered ballots that you're talking about. There's a slew of different legal challenges in Pennsylvania. Are you saying that you don't think that any of them have merit?
Well, name one that hasn't been a long shot or irrelevant to the task at hand of counting these ballots that are all legally received.
In addition to the legal challenges that, as you say, are being shot down left and right, another thing that Republicans seem to be doing is criticizing your Secretary of State and saying that this could all have gone much more easily. The Philadelphia Inquirer reports State Senate Majority Leader Jake Corman accused Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar of giving faulty guidance and making unlawful changes to election rules that had undermined confidence in Pennsylvania's results. They say it had been chaotic and a faulty process and has sowed doubt.
That's categorically false. And I also would like to point out that Leader Corman also said yesterday that there is no evidence of any fraud occurring in Pennsylvania, too, as the top Republican in Pennsylvania. Furthermore, this delay can be laid squarely at the feet of the Pennsylvania GOP, who would not grant us even a 24-hour window to begin pre-canvassing, or 48 hours. And this would have avoided all of this. This would have already been over if they had simply allowed that. They orchestrated this long, dragged-out process, and here we are. But at the end of the day, it's not going to go well. And I would just urge the Trump campaign to just embrace math and allow this country to move on.
Well, on that note, it doesn't seem to be in President Trump's DNA to admit defeat. I mean, at least not what we've seen in terms of his behavior in the White House over the past 4 years. So what do you think on that higher level if the president refuses to concede if Biden wins?
All I know is that the math on the ground in Pennsylvania is the U-Haul truck to the Trump presidency at this point. You know, it's gonna end it. And I would just urge at this point that we take up a collective understanding of where this is going in Pennsylvania. You look at the ballot breakdown, you look at the trends, and you just look at the simple fact that there's a no path. And at this point, we need to start bringing this country together and moving forward.
And what do you think about what Joe Biden's tone has been thus far when he's come out to speak?
Absolutely. Joe Biden's handling it perfectly, and that's my point. But I am just stating the reality here, is that there's an optimal level of cautiousness, and we don't want to get in front of anything. But, you know, when we're over 30,000 votes and climbing from a giant pool of mail-in ballots that break heavily to the point of 75, 80% or more that are going to be added to this total, there just isn't a path mathematically. There isn't some enchanted village of all Trump voters that hasn't weighed in yet in Pennsylvania. I know this to be true. And at this point, all they're doing is hurling these smears and allegations, baseless allegations, that's undermining the democratic process, not only in Pennsylvania, but in the nation. We need to just come to a final understanding that the numbers aren't going to change. They haven't changed. Everything in this primary in Pennsylvania has played out exactly as everybody would say with the numbers and the ballots on the ground.
Look, I mean, obviously, CNN's decision desk is exercising caution and looking at all of the algorithm and plugging in the numbers and their models and everything and trying to proceed cautiously. But you're saying that if it were up to you, you'd call it right now.
What I'm trying to say is that I don't, no matter how generous of a perspective you have towards giving Trump the benefit of the doubt, where are these votes coming from? Where is this uncertainty lie? And I just also want to talk about provisional ballots. I think the majority of them are going to be individuals that chose to spoil their mail-in ballot because for whatever reason they wanted to vote in person, or they didn't trust the underlying integrity of the mail-in ballot process because there was a lot of Republican misinformation and campaigning. At the end of the day, those are going to, I suspect, break even at a small margin in the vice president's favor as well, too.
Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, we always appreciate talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's go back to John.
All right, major developments overnight. Coronavirus cases reaching astronomical new records in the United States. And that number now includes the White House Chief of Staff. Stay tuned. Our special live coverage continues. The counting has resumed in Philadelphia this morning. In the meantime, as we await news from there, the country is setting and then breaking new records when it comes to coronavirus cases. Friday alone, the U.S. added more than 126,000 new coronavirus cases. That is the single highest number of cases in one day since the pandemic began. The country also saw 4 straight days of more than 1,000 deaths this week. 16 states are reporting record high hospitalizations. And former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb warned that cases are likely to explode in the coming weeks.
And also, John, we learned overnight that the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, has tested positive for the virus. CNN's Ryan Nobles joins us now from Washington. Ryan, do we know when he got sick, who he was around, things like that?
We don't know the specifics, Allison, of when the chief of staff contracted the illness, in part because we are told that he wanted to keep it a secret. He did not want it to get out, though the White House has said that they've done extensive contact tracing related to the chief of staff and who he's been in contact with. But if you just look at where he has been in public and the way he has behaved in public over the past week, you can see that he was not taking all that many precautions to stop the spread of the coronavirus. On election night, he was here at the White House at the election night party, not wearing a mask. He has been seen at numerous Trump rallies leading up to Election Day, fist bumping Trump supporters without a mask on. He was also at the Trump headquarters on the day of the election in close contact with many staffers, also not wearing a mask. And Meadows is someone who rarely, if ever, wears masks, and even at times gets annoyed with reporters when they ask him why he is not wearing a mask, when they ask him to wear a mask to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Also, sources inside the White House say that over the past week, the chief of staff has been in and out of the White House residence. He's been in and out of the West Wing as well. We don't exactly know how he's behaving at this stage because after his coronavirus diagnosis, but we just know up until this point, at least when he learned he had the coronavirus, he was not being very responsible. And then also, John and Allison, before I go, I should point out that we haven't heard very much from President Trump as it relates to the election. Over the past 24 to 48 hours, he is now up and tweeting this morning. He is again putting out a number of baseless claims about the vote count, its accuracy, trying to undermine this process. I won't get into the details because a lot of these claims are without merit, but it just goes to show you the psyche of President Trump right now as these votes come in. It doesn't look like he's anywhere in the ballpark of even considering conceding to Vice President Joe Biden.
As we keep saying, Ryan, it's not up to him. It's up to the American people, and right now, the will of the American people is being felt. We are counting the votes as we speak. Thank you so much for being with us. In Philadelphia, the counting has resumed this morning. We're waiting to get an update from Pennsylvania. We have a sense of the shape, what these ballots look like. That's next. Welcome back to CNN's special live coverage and update on two crucial states. First, the state of Nevada, 6 electoral votes. Joe Biden with a 22,000 vote lead, more than 100,000 votes remaining, most from heavily Democratic areas. Many people think Joe Biden's lead will expand there. Arizona, a bit of a different story. Joe Biden leading by 29,000 votes, 11 electoral votes up for grabs. Biden's lead has been shrinking in Arizona, though Republicans in that state will tell you not by enough, at least not yet, for President Trump to overtake Joe Biden. Still, we're watching it very closely. Allison?
John, Arizona will be working through the weekend to try to get through the more than 200,000 ballots that we're told remain to be counted. And CNN's Bill Weir is there. He's in Phoenix. So, Bill, give us a status report. What are you hearing?
Well, Allison, we're hearing that the next big vote dump here is in a couple hours out of the Maricopa recorder's office here. And what we've seen, the metaphor I've been using is if Joe Biden's lead is a big boulder, a big rock, President Trump has been chipping away at it with hammers when what he really needs is dynamite to blow this thing up. It's just every little gain doesn't seem to be enough as they winnow down the last few 100,000 votes in this state. Yesterday, President Trump picked up about 7,000 votes here in the most populous county in Arizona, and to bring him within 30,000. But as you look around, Navajo, Pima, Yuma County, Cochise, these little trickles, little bit of advantage in each one of these dumps for President Trump, but not a big enough. Even in the Yavapai, that's McCain country, went predominantly for President Trump, but not enough to push him over. You got to wonder what the McCain family thinks about that. There's probably about, I guess the Secretary of State tells us last night, 173,000 votes in total left in the state of Arizona. About 92,000 of those are here. But also to keep in mind, 47,000 of those are provisional ballots. So these are folks who didn't have the right address on their driver's license. And they have a week to come back and correct that for their vote to be counted. So not all of those votes will be counted. People won't follow through for whatever reason. So the window of opportunity for President Trump is really narrowing. And what's interesting is a lot of state officials, Republican state officials, refused to say on a press conference yesterday that there was any sort of shenanigans going on. They refuse to toe that line. You're hearing from some Trump loyalists that things are fishy. They say this is as Governor Ducey of Arizona promised the president, we can do it efficiently. We can run an election in a pandemic and get it done. They're staying away from charges of election fraud. Allison, John?
Good to hear. Very good to hear. Bill Weir, thank you for all of those updated numbers for us. All right, let's go back to John.
And let me just say, people need to stick with CNN all day long, if for no other reason, to see Bill Weir do math. In the meantime, let's go to Kristen Holmes at the voting desk. Bill brought up provisional ballots, and this has become something of a major issue in Pennsylvania. Help us understand what these are and what it means, Kristen.
Yeah, John, this is one of the great things about this election. I know a lot of people are frustrated that we haven't called it, that they are being encouraged to be patient. But one of the great things about this election is that it's giving us an opportunity to learn things that happen in literally every election. So one of them is provisional ballots. And right now in Pennsylvania, there are 101,000 provisional ballots. Big deal because this is, of course, a critical swing state. So what exactly does that mean? Essentially, it is a ballot that is cast when the eligibility of the voter comes into question. Why would that come into question? It can be something incredibly simple. You forgot your ID at home. Your mail-in ballot was rejected, or you ordered an absentee ballot. When you get there, you don't have it, but you're supposed to. They essentially let you cast your ballot, and then they put it to the side. Now, here's the kind of catch to a provisional ballot. I talked to an official in Erie County, Pennsylvania. I asked him, how long does it take to actually count a provisional ballot? And he told me 1 to 20 minutes per ballot. The reason being that what you have to do, or what these election officials have to do, is go into the system and find out if you're actually eligible. Now, in a place like Pennsylvania, they have a statewide system. They enter in the information they know, but sometimes there's a catch. Your name could be spelled a little differently in the record, which means they have to spend more time finding that record and then correcting it and making sure that you are eligible to vote. So this, again, is just another factor that's playing into this election, and something that election officials are encouraging people to remain patient as they start to go through these. They have 7 days to count all these provisional ballots. John?
1 to 20 minutes per ballot, 85,000 ballots in Pennsylvania could lead to 85,000 minutes. Sounds like the worst song ever from Rent. Kristen Holmes, thank you for being with us. Thank you for explaining provisional ballots, because they are very much in play. This morning, the president is lying. He's awake and lying about the election. We'll speak live with the commissioner of the Federal Election Commission to hear her response next. All right, welcome back to CNN's special live coverage, 8:40 a.m. on the East Coast, and we know the president is awake and he is lying. He is on social media saying things that are simply not true about the election and the electoral process. Joining us to discuss, the commissioner of the Federal Election Commission, Ellen Weintraub. Ellen, Commissioner, thanks so much for being with us. I'm not going to read the president's tweet because it's just false. It's an outright lie. So I want to ask you the other side of that question. Based on what you've seen, how has the process worked so far? How have our systems held up?
Well, actually, it's been quite remarkable. I and many other people were so concerned about how we were going to run this election during a pandemic. And state and local officials and poll workers throughout the country really stepped up. And there have been very few complaints about how this election has run. Very few substantiated complaints, let me put it that way. There is no evidence of any kind of voter fraud. There is no evidence of illegal votes being cast. In fact, and you don't have to take my word for it. Experts have come out and hailed this election and how it was run. If you want to look at the state of Pennsylvania, which the president seems to be focused on, Senator Toomey has come out and said that he has seen no evidence of fraud there. The Republican leader of the state Senate there has also said that he has seen no evidence of fraud. They would know. They're on the ground. They're there in Pennsylvania. And there really has been no evidence of fraud. None of the complaints have attached any evidence of fraud. It's really, we should feel very proud of ourselves that we had record turnout, and people did care about this election. They turned out in numbers that were higher than any election in the last 120 years. it was really kind of amazing, and we should all feel really good about this. And when the pandemic is over, thank a poll worker, thank a local election official.
Wow, it has really revealed, actually, the painstaking work that these election vote counters are doing. We just had our reporter, Kristen Holmes, on saying that for some of these provisional ballots, it can take between 1 and 20 minutes. That's the estimate of how long it takes to count it, because they have to compare the signatures sometimes. They have to look for whatever the problem was. And so I guess, Commissioner, my question is, yes, we've done really well, remarkably, but is there some way to streamline this for the future? Have we learned some lessons this time?
Well, one thing that we could do, which some states have done, and other states, for reasons known only to their state legislatures, refuse to do, is we could start processing mail-in ballots earlier. The states that have the most experience with absentee ballots do this. As the mail-in ballots come in, they start processing them. So you don't have, on election day, in addition to having to run the in-person election, now you've got to allocate staff to start counting the millions of ballots that have been sitting there just waiting to be processed. So that, I think, would be my #1 recommendation, to try and streamline the system going forward. I also think, and this really doesn't go so much to streamlining as to access, there are a lot of steps that states could take to make voting more accessible, because there were still people who had trouble having access to the polls, particularly in a pandemic. There were lines that were too long. There were obstacles that were placed in the way of people registering easily and then voting easily. And there are solid proposals on the table in Congress for making these processes better, and they should adopt them.
Just to be clear, this is not an abstraction, what you're talking about legislatures allowing votes to be cast before 8 p.m. on Tuesday night. Pennsylvania Republicans blocked efforts to have that state begin counting the ballots that had been in earlier, and now we're seeing the results. We're waiting on Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania Republicans made this choice. It was an affirmative decision by them to put us in the situation we're in now. Commissioner, I do want to ask you about the legal challenges to certain ballots that have been filed around the country. Save one case, which is a case dealing with ballots that have arrived in Pennsylvania after the polls closed on Tuesday night, which are being segregated. I'm not aware of any lawsuit that deals with a class of ballots or a large group of ballots. You're talking about individual ballots here or there. Is there anything out there that even in some conceivable world could overturn thousands and thousands of ballots in any state, any of these lawsuits?
No, the lawsuits seem to be, for the most part, going after a few ballots here and a few ballots there, and given the margins, it does not look like there's anything that could affect the outcome. Back before I was on the FEC, when I was in private practice, I did some recount work, and really, if the margin is more than a few hundred votes, recount lawyers know that you're not going to be able to flip the election. So the notion that a few dozen votes here or there could make a difference, it's just not going to happen.
Ellen Weintraub, thank you very much for helping us understand all this. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, so with the election results trending in Joe Biden's favor, many of you are asking, why hasn't the race been called yet? We're going to explain next. Okay, folks, we know that when you look at the numbers on your screen, you can clearly see that Joe Biden is leading in those 4 key battleground states. And so many of you are asking, why, CNN? Why have you not called any of these states for Joe Biden yet? For that answer and for who to blame, we turn to CNN political director David Chalian and toss that hot potato right into his lap. What's
Thanks,
going on,
Allison.
David?
I love
Anytime.
this. That's great. No, seriously, it is the question everybody's asking. It makes perfect sense. We are reporting out what are clear trends in these vote counts. You see in Pennsylvania, for example, every time a batch of votes come in, especially if they're mail votes. They're going overwhelmingly for Joe Biden. He pads his lead. We've watched this for days now. Here's the issue. What our decision desk, a team of statistical experts and analysts who dive through every bit of vote information as reports occur, are looking to get to an extraordinarily high level of certainty that the number 2 candidate, in this case Donald Trump, has no way of overtaking the number 1 candidate, in this case Joe Biden, with what is still outstanding. And so part of our reporting effort is to learn everything we can about what is outstanding. What do we know about provisional ballots? Do we know if any have been counted and how are they behaving? What do we know about any outstanding mail ballots and where they're from? All of those things. And we need to see enough vote come in to confirm that our assumption about the way these votes are going to behave is actually occurring. And there's only one way to confirm an assumption, which is to actually see the votes come in until enough votes come in to get you to the threshold where you are 99.7% certain that the number 2 candidate can't overtake the number 1 candidate. That's when a projection occurs.
Even the construction crews had assumed the election would be over by Saturday because they're at work. They're at work in the Washington Bureau this morning. David, the provisional ballots. To what extent has the composition of the provisional ballots perhaps caused some pause? And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with pause because you want certainty here. But there are an unusually high number of provisional ballots in Pennsylvania. Explain why maybe it has been challenging to understand the shape of these ballots.
Well, this is related to the fact that we're doing this election in the pandemic, right, John? And that people are voting differently, specifically in Pennsylvania, which has no history of this kind of volume of vote by mail and absentee voting. And so it's not just, typically, let's say pre-pandemic in an election, provisional ballot, somebody's not on the voter roll, they get to fill it out, it gets checked later on, or a signature doesn't match. But here, people who received a ballot in the mail, but maybe didn't send it in, and then shows up at the polls. There's a whole new universe of people in a high mail voting election that may be casting provisional ballots on Election Day. Now, here's the thing we have to figure out, right? We know Election Day voters, we saw what President Trump was able to do, completely deliver a really impressive turnout of his voters on Election Day. And we know that the vote-by-mail voters overwhelmingly were Joe Biden voters in this election. So knowing, though, that the people who are casting provisional ballots may be more like mail voters, even though their ballot is being cast on Election Day, or are they more like Election Day voters? That needs to be sorted because we haven't seen this kind of level of provisional ballot history because of the mail issue.
Do you have any sense yet what they are looking more like? Because what we're hearing from election officials and what we're seeing in some evidence in counties like Erie County, Pennsylvania, is it's right in the middle. It turns to be like the overall state turnout is what it seems to be.
Well, again, we're hearing some reports where they've looked at some. I think I heard Kate Baldwin was reporting this morning in Philadelphia there are some 18,000 provisional ballots. They're not even going to look at those until next week. So there are some places we're not going to have insight into what the provisionals look like. But I just want to stress it's not just provisionals that are still outstanding, right? So it could be that we learn more in the next vote installment of where the vote by mail is, and the provisionals become immaterial. I don't mean immaterial for the voters who cast them. They're material, they're votes, but immaterial to the outcome and the ability to make a projection. So that's where we're at right now. It's not anything other than waiting for enough vote to hit a threshold and hit that level of certainty to make a projection.
Yeah, we have to go, David, but I'm just curious, who's going to win?
I mean, Allison, clearly all the trend line shows us who's going to win this election. We just need to get to that place of certainty to make projections.
I appreciate your exercise of caution. Sure. Thank you for explaining all of that. It was really helpful, David.
Sure.
Okay, up next, the counting is underway again in Philadelphia this morning, we're told. We'll speak to one of the city commissioners live.
John Berman here, along with Allison Camerata. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. The nation's wait may soon be over. May, but we think probably, as Joe Biden closes in on winning the presidential election.
Biden's lead over President Trump continues to grow in key battleground states, and we do expect a new round of counted ballots this morning that could put Joe Biden over the top. But President Trump is vowing to fight on in court while Biden is urging unity.
All right, the count in terms of electoral votes at this moment, Joe Biden has 253. The president has 213. Biden is potentially one state, or in this case, one Commonwealth away from the magic number. And that is where we begin with a CNN Key Race Alert. It is the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with 20 electoral votes that could put Joe Biden over the top. If he wins that, he wins the election. Currently, he leads there by 28,000 votes. That number has been growing. Tens of thousands of votes remaining, many of them from heavily Democratic areas. We are expecting some information from Pennsylvania soon and some new votes to report to you soon. Other states we're watching: Georgia. Overnight, Joe Biden's lead there grew from 4,000 to more than 7,000. Doesn't sound like a lot, but each vote there counts in a race so close. 16 electoral votes up for grabs. They don't have much vote left to count there. That state going to a recount for sure. Let's also talk now about Arizona. 11 electoral votes. Joe Biden's lead there has been shrinking. He now has a 29,000 vote lead. Republicans will tell you that Donald Trump needs to be winning about 60% of the remaining vote to overtake Joe Biden. That hasn't been happening. We're waiting to see what happens with the next batch of votes from Arizona later this morning. Finally, let's talk about Nevada. 6 electoral votes. Joe Biden leading by 22,000 votes. A lot of ballots left there, more than 100,000, but most of them come from Clark County, which is the Democratic area of that state. There is the expectation that Joe Biden's lead will grow. Again, waiting for more information from the state of Nevada. Allison?
Go to Pennsylvania, where we are told more than 80,000 mail-in ballots remain to be counted. CNN's Kate Baldwin is live in Philadelphia for us this morning. So what is that status report, Kate?
So you talk about the 80,000 across the Commonwealth, Allison. It's 20,000 is the key number here in Philadelphia. 20,000 mail-in ballots. That is where all of the focus is this morning. These are ballots that, the mail-in ballots that require extra review. They require a second look, hence why they're being dealt with kind of later in the process, because it takes more time. The process slows down slightly. They actually call them problem child ballots here, because that's exactly what they are. They need a little extra review. Things like dates are missing. So some people put their birth date where they're supposed to be putting the current date on their mail-in ballot. They signed the wrong envelope. There is a variety of reasons for these ballots to require extra review, and that is what they're going to be getting at this morning. The last update that we had from Philadelphia was yesterday evening, when they uploaded an addition results for a little over 2,000 more ballots. We're waiting to see how many more they will be getting this morning. We're told there will be updates and uploads to the city website that gives the official, the unofficial, but the official count of where they stand. We're expecting updates. The count will change, but it is not clear at this moment when that will happen and by how much, because overnight they had 60 workers in the facility beside me and behind me preparing these problem child ballots for review. That review has started up this morning, and it's just the process of getting through them, how many they can get through, and when that update happens. Allison?
Kate, thank you for explaining all of that, and we will await updates from you. Thanks for all of that. John.
All right, I'm with Phil Mattingly at the Magic Wall. We're going to stick with Pennsylvania. We're not ignoring Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona, but we're sticking with Pennsylvania because this alone could give Joe Biden a victory. And this right now alone is where votes are being counted this morning. So let's take a look at Pennsylvania, where the votes are and what we know about them.
I'd add another additional element to it. This alone has a very, very clear trend line that is heading in Joe Biden's favor. Everybody has had all eyes. I think the entire world right now is staring directly at Pennsylvania, maybe just through this wall or through a Google map or something along those lines, to try and get a better sense of what's outstanding right now. Why has this race not been called? Why, for the time being, is Joe Biden leading by 28,000? And is that going to stick And the answer is it's probably going to grow. And we'll start with Allegheny County. It's the home of Pittsburgh. We had a discussion with an official earlier kind of walking us through what was outstanding there. And if you're the Biden campaign and you listen to that conversation, you feel very good about what's in Allegheny County. There's about 20,000 outstanding mail-in ballots. And the reality for the entire state of Pennsylvania, not unlike Michigan, not unlike Wisconsin, is the mail-in ballots have been leaning heavily Democratic over the course of the last several days. That has been the crux of why Joe Biden has had a lead in this state. There are 20,000 ballots here. And the expectation was the spread, we were told, is about 80 to 20. You look at the ratio here, you look at the margin, 59 to 39, that's different. That's lower. And yet, because of the mail-in ballots that are coming in, about 20,000, in that area of margin right now, it underscores the advantage that Joe Biden has. And it's not just Allegheny County, it's also the other Democratic stronghold in the state. That is southeastern Pennsylvania.
You know what? Circle Philadelphia for us.
I'm going to just bring it up.
Right. Let's pause.
Yep.
All right, we're going to bring in Philadelphia City Commissioner Omar Sabir, who we just got on the line here to get a sense of what vote is outstanding from Philadelphia. Commissioner, thank you so much for being with us. John Berman here along with Phil Mattingly. Can you tell us how many votes and what kind of votes remain from Philadelphia?
Again, you know, we have approximately about 40,000 or so votes. Again, we have, 20,000 of those ballots, and then we have roughly around 18,000 or so of the provisional ballots. And so, again, we're going to try our best, to get through the problem childs, as they call them, problematic ballots. But again, I just want to be clear to everyone, that it's not like, a microwave dinner. It's not like you just throw around and get instant gratification. Again, it takes time. We're going to be meticulous. We're going to be accurate. And believe me, I want to go home just as much as everyone else wants to go home. But we have to take our time. We have to do it right.
Omar, Commissioner, we are so appreciative of the work you are doing there. We really are, and we know it's not easy. We want you to thank each and every one of the workers for the work that they're doing. 20,000 mail-in ballots, 18,000 or so provisionals. When do you expect, Commissioner, that you will announce or release the next batch of results?
Okay, so it'll be at some point today. Again, stay tuned. I'm getting ready to go, and I just had my coffee, just took my shower and everything. We're going to go into the convention center and see exactly what's going on. But again, it's going to be at some point today. But again, I can't stress how much important it is. We're talking to America. We're talking around the world to be patient, okay? There's a lot of tensions. There's a lot of, everybody is just going crazy right now. So again, I'm asking everybody to take a deep breath and calm down. And we're going to get through it accurately as possible. Again, we want it rapidly, accurately, and we're going to do it with transparency.
And I think everyone is calm and everyone is patient and understands the work you're going through. When you say at some point today, I think people just want to know, Commissioner, can they go get a cup of coffee? Can they walk around the block? Are you talking before noon at this point for another batch or afternoon?
Again, at some point today, again, remember the words that I may say out of my mouth affect the world. Someone just called me and said, hey, I'm in another country around the world and we want to know what's going on. There could be potential war based on the results of what happened with this election. So again, we're going to take our time. Again, at some point today, you will get the updates again. I like CNN. I love CNN. We're going to give you the information as soon as we get it.
Commissioner Phil Mattingly here again. Thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for what the entire team is doing there. I wanted to know if you had a sense of the universe of where the 20,000 problem child ballots actually come from. We've all kind of noticed, looking through the data, that there's a number of precincts that seem to have very low reporting right now in the city of Philadelphia. Is it fair to assume that the bulk of what's outstanding right now comes from those precincts, or do you have any sense of that right now?
Not right now. Again, I mean, we had meetings. Again, I'm on 30 minutes worth of sleep. So again, let me just go in, just evaluate to see exactly what's going on. We had meetings last night, and again, we're going over. We're trying to evaluate it. We're trying to get this done for everyone. And again, we'll give more information as soon as we get it.
And to Phil's point, is there any in-person Philadelphia vote left to count? Because there's been some speculation that that might be part of the overall pot we're looking at also.
Okay, so there are, I think we're up to about 97%. It's on our website. Again, I can't see it, but we're almost there. We're missing a couple divisions. So we have over 1,700 divisions. Might maybe be about 2 or 3 divisions or so that we're missing. Again, I'm not looking at the website right now. But we're almost there. We're missing a couple divisions. It's not that much, which is typical, in an election. This is not uncommon.
Commissioner, how many votes are you getting through? Roughly speaking, how long does it take to process each vote or each 100 votes or each 1,000 votes? Give us a sense of the process.
Again, there's no real sense in time. Again, as we identify all the problem childs, we'll come back to the return board, and then, once they all get segregated, we'll come as a return board, and then we'll 3 commissioners will vote on the problem child, whether or not we'll accept them. So again, it takes time. It's tedious work. It's meticulous work. And again, I'd like to thank the County Board of Elections for doing this work that they do. It's phenomenal. But again, as soon as we get the information, again, it's a public process. When we vote, we'll do it right at the convention center, so everyone will be able to observe us, making the votes on these problem childs.
And Commissioner, I know you're busy, and we'll let you get back to it, but kind of along those lines, Philadelphia has been attacked by the president pretty acutely over the course of the last couple of days. What's kind of your response to that? What's your view when you hear that, based on what you've seen and what you've been involved in?
Well, I mean, listen, it's America, right? Everyone has freedom of speech. So again, he has his opinion. I mean, that's his opinion. But just because he makes an opinion, it doesn't necessarily make it fact. It doesn't make it the truth. Again, just to reiterate, in Philadelphia, you're going to get a safe, you're going to get a secure, and you're going to get an accurate election. Again, we want it rapidly, accurately, and we're going to do it with transparency.
Omar Sabir, Philadelphia City Commissioner, we thank you so much for being with us and shedding some light on the process, where we are right now. More importantly, we thank you and the people you work with for counting those votes, for helping everyone make their voice heard. So we'll get you a cup of coffee when we can. We owe you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Now to the nuts and bolts. What did we just learn? Well, not much about the timing. He said at some point today. That's going to be frustrating for people. Pittsburgh, Allegheny County earlier today told us sometime late this morning, early this afternoon, they're going to begin releasing more counts. Philadelphia, a lot less clarity. What we do know, 20,000 mail-in votes still to be counted. So let's do some math on just the 20,000, Phil. 20,000 mail-in votes. Joe Biden's been getting 80%. Conservatively.
That's conservative. Yeah,
conservatively.
We'll go with that. We'll
80% in Philadelphia. I've done the math. That would be 16,000 votes in Philadelphia for Joe Biden, 4,000 for Donald Trump. That would be a 12,000 vote margin that you would be able to add to the overall total. It's at 28,000. That would put Joe Biden at 40,000, roughly.
Right.
Allegheny County, 20,000 mail-in ballots, 75 to 80%. Let's just do the same math so we don't have to do it again. Maybe another 12,000 votes. That would put Joe Biden over 50,000. This is without even counting the provisional ballots, which we think have the same rough shape. So you start to see how this adds up very quickly.
It underscores the reality that I think both campaigns have seen. The Biden campaign is willing to talk about it publicly, but we've also been talking about it pretty routinely over the course of the last 24 hours. And you also have to underscore the fact that there are other counties in Democratic strongholds. You can just kind of move around, and you see Montgomery County still 95% reporting. You look at that margin. You've got Chester County, a Democratic stronghold for the most part, if you push out into the collar counties, still 95% reporting. So not huge, not as big a batches as you have in Allegheny and as you have in Philadelphia, but everything you're looking at right now is the type of vote that will add votes on net to Joe Biden. And so when we talk about what the final margin might be, when you look at 28,000 right now, you're talking 50, 60, 70,000 potentially. And the outstanding question that nobody has an answer to is, where does Donald Trump go to define vote? The answer is, we're not sure they exist.
Yeah, in fact, there is some evidence they don't exist.
Right.
But we're waiting. The counts are coming in. Allegheny County told us we could get some later this morning. We obviously will bring them to you the minute we have them. So, Phil, go back to the wall, do some math. In the meantime, we know President Trump is watching. We know he's awake because he has spent the last hour lying on Twitter about the vote around the country. 4 of his tweets already labeled inaccurate. Next, a Republican election lawyer joins us to talk about how this will play out in the courts.
Ballot counting underway in Pennsylvania. You can see it live happening there on the side of the screen in Pittsburgh right now. Joe Biden is appealing for unity and patience as the nation awaits the election results. CNN's Jessica Dean is in Wilmington, Delaware, near Biden headquarters. So what are you hearing about what's happening behind the scenes there?
Well, good morning to you, Allison. The Biden campaign and Joe Biden himself waiting like the rest of us. You see the stage that's been set up for days. It's still set up behind me. The question is, will it get used today? How will that all pan out? Everyone waiting for this race to be called. Everyone waiting for these ballots to be counted. Meantime, we did see Joe Biden late last night as he addressed the nation. And you mentioned he called for unity. He also believes firmly that when all of these votes are counted and when this race is called, he will prevail. But he's already started with that message of unity, of trying to bring Americans together and turn down the temperature. Take a listen.
We may be opponents, but we're not enemies. We're Americans. No matter who you voted for, I'm certain of one thing. The vast majority of almost 150 million Americans who voted, they want to get the vitriol out of our politics.
Biden went on to say that there's no time to waste on the crises facing the nation. He's continued to get his COVID briefings, for example. Allison, we saw him earlier this week going into one of those briefings, and they're trying to get ready to put their plan in place should he become the president-elect of the United States. We also know that, like so many Americans, he's been at home watching these results come in with family and also senior advisors. But right now, Allison, we all just wait.
It is hard to live in limbo, Jessica. We know that, but that is where we are at the moment. Thank you very much. So moments ago, Twitter flagged 4 of President Trump's latest tweets as misleading. They include multiple baseless claims about voter fraud. But as far as we know, none of his claims in the key battleground states are supported by evidence. So still, they're launching legal challenges. Will those gum up the process? Joining us now is Ben Ginsberg, a Republican election lawyer who was central to the 2000 Florida recount battle during Bush versus Gore. Ben, great to see you. I don't want to read the president's tweets because they've been labeled as misinformation, but I will try to summarize them for you. He is very upset. He seems very upset about these ballots in Pennsylvania that were postmarked they were postmarked on Election Day or by Election Day, but received in the 3 days after. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court already ruled that that was totally legal and legit. So is there a chance that the U.S. Supreme Court, since the president keeps complaining about it, and as do his lawyers, could reverse that?
Look, there's always a chance, but I think it's unlikely because that would result in the disenfranchisement of a large number of voters who simply followed the directions they were given by election administrators. It would be a valid case for the Supreme Court to consider the whole idea of extending deadlines past Election Day, but not involving this election. And for Pennsylvania, there's also an interesting legal but somewhat obscure question about whether the legislature or the state Supreme Court is the final decider on elections cases.
And what's the answer to that one?
It's a good question. So the literal words in the Constitution are the legislature, but it isn't clear that legislature is not a more expansive term. You can flip a coin on it.
So the U.S. Supreme Court's going to have to decide that one?
Yeah, they can decide it. They don't have to decide it. But it won't, I think it's unlikely that that would impact this election. It is a valid ruling for the people of Pennsylvania to know for their state and legislative races in 2021.
Another thing the president brings up, and again, I'm going to paraphrase it rather than read it because we don't have any evidence of it, but I do hear his surrogates and allies talking a lot about this and ginning up, or trying to gin up a lot of outrage about this. It's the so-called observers of the counters. So as far as we know, there's an equal amount of Republican observers, Democratic observers. They were supposed to stand 10 feet away from the vote counters. They, I think, won in court to be able to move closer to 6 feet. Is there anything going wrong with this, as far as you know? Is there any legal legitimacy to this?
Well, no. I mean, there have been observers. That's not been a question. They want more access, closer access. They've been given that. The important thing to remember is that there are no allegations of fraud involved in this. There are no votes involved in it that would impact the ultimate count in the state. So it's a bit of procedural complaining, maybe even whining. Let the people stand closer if they think they need that. But again, this isn't going to affect the outcome.
So, Ben, what about these legal challenges? There's a slew of them, not just in Pennsylvania, but the president's team has launched them in various battleground states. And I believe we are already headed to a recount in Georgia. And so will that slow down the process? I mean, let's say that Joe Biden is declared the winner. Will any of that slow down the transition?
So that's a good question. And we should separate out recounts, which any candidate is entitled to and takes place under state processes, with any number of the lawsuits that have been filed, which don't seem to be outcome determinative and probably not well founded. So each state has a process to conduct its recounts and timelines in which it should finish up and not delay the process. But, and here's the but, none of these states have really road tested their recount laws under the stress of a Pennsylvania contest. And so in Florida in 2000, for example, it took a long time and came right up on the deadlines. So you do need certified results of the election before the Electoral College is supposed to meet. December 8th, Safe Harbor, December 14th, the actual meeting of the electors in the state capitol. So that is a deadline to keep involved. Think of poor Georgia, 159 counties. That's 100 more than we had to deal with in Florida. They have 2 Senate runoff elections at the same time. All that activity in Georgia is a sign that the political gods do have a sense of humor.
That's one interpretation, and I like it. Ben Ginsberg, thank you very much. Great
Thanks,
to talk
Allison.
to you. Let's go back to John.
All right, we do have reporting that Joe Biden and his team are already in the planning process for the transition. We're going to speak to the man who was in charge of the Bush transition team in 2000. That transition took place during controversy. We're going to get his take on what the Biden folks and, frankly, the White House should be doing right now. Stick around. We know they are counting votes in Pennsylvania. We've been told that Allegheny County, home of Pittsburgh, could release some results later this morning. We are watching that very closely. Now, even while they are counting, there is planning in place for the presidential transition, either for a second Trump administration or what seems more likely now, a Biden administration.
Okay, so for more on this, we're joined now by CNN political commentator and former advisor to President Bill Clinton, Paul Begala, as well as the executive director of the Bush 2000 transition team and former assistant to President George W. Bush, Clay Johnson. Mr. Johnson, I want to start with you because there are similarities in that there are also legal challenges this time around. President Trump's legal team are launching lots of sometimes meritless legal challenges, according to the judges, but still, there is a slew of them. And I'm wondering if what happened in 2000 ended up bogging down the transition and stalling it somehow.
A little bit, but not much. Most candidates for president back then did not even want to utter the word transition until the election was over. They thought it was bad, would cause him to get unlucky, which is sort of silly. Bush challenged me in 16 months before the election when he asked me to be his chief of staff in Austin. And besides being chief of staff, Clay, I want you to develop a plan for what we do when I win the presidency 16 months from now. So he challenged me to take the next 16 months and plan a transition. My understanding is that candidate Biden has brought I read this morning, has brought a good close friend of his and a very knowledgeable Washington person on board to start organizing his transition 4, 5, 6 months ago. That has to happen. You have to assume you are going to win, and it's just a matter of when you start putting people into place. And so Dick Cheney said, we can't wait to find out what the courts are going to rule. We have to assume that we are going to be the president-elect, and so we opened up an office early before the votes were made official, and went up there and raised some private money and established a transition office. And so, and it wasn't until after the courts ruled that we moved into government offices and we could expand our staff, but we were working hard. You can't wait until someone says, okay, it's ready to go, because there's a lot of work that has to be done before noon on January 20th, and you got to start early, and you got to work through hectic times. You're deluged with a lot of input, and you just have to manage it and be prepared to govern by the time the new president is sworn in.
Look, I remember this because I was there. I was in Austin, and George W. Bush announced his senior White House staff in the middle of the recount. George W. Bush announced cabinet selections in the middle of the recount for a couple of reasons. One, because you have to, because you need to start to get the ball rolling. But the other reason is because it lets the world know that you think you've won, and it gives a sense of finality to it all. The question is the Clinton administration wasn't uncooperative with you. The outgoing Clinton administration, didn't shut the door in your face when you were transition planning. What happens if the Trump administration does shut the door in the face of the Biden team in the transition?
Well, there's not a whole lot that the outgoing current administration can do to significantly impair transition planning for an incoming administration. There are some things they can do to make it nice, like the first time that a new administration sits down in the Situation Room to deal with some major international matter should not be when the meeting is for real. I mean, the people who are going to be in there making hugely important decisions should have had some prior experience with sort of informal briefings and so forth, just to get used to the ambiance of the place and what it looks like and what a typical military presentation looks like and so forth and so on. And so that can be facilitated by an outgoing administration, but if that isn't facilitated by the outgoing administration, there are other ways you just can play catch up in the first few days back. But you can do make decisions about who your appointees are going to be. You can do informal background checks. In our case, we had a prior general counsel for, I think it was President Reagan, Fred Fielding was his name, who would meet with people that we were most high on to be the secretary of this and that, and would ask him the important questions about potential conflicts of interest and improprieties and so forth, and say, tell us now what's there, and proceed forward. And if something comes up in the background check later that we're not aware of, we're going to drop you, but otherwise we're going to stand behind you. And so we could do all the things that you could do informally that you had to do, wait until you were officially the candidate to do it formally.
Makes sense. Paul, of course, former Vice President Biden knows his way around the White House and the West Wing. Will that make the transition easier?
Oh, I think it definitely will. He has Ted Kaufman is the guy, Clay, that he's so close to Joe. He was Joe's chief of staff for decades in the Senate. When Joe became vice president, the governor of Delaware appointed Ted as the interim senator to fill Biden's seat. That's how close. He's the closest person to Joe, whose last name is not Biden. And with rich experience. They're operating, as Clay knows, under the Presidential Transition Act of 1963. That was beefed up and the funding increased by a bill written by interim Senator Ted Kaufman. So they don't have a choice. They, by law, must allow agency review teams, for example, these, the landing teams, you used to call them landing parties, go into each agency to review what's going on there and changes that you might want to make. There are background checks that must be done. There are legal requirements. Now, of course, this president thumbs his nose at all norms and legal requirements. The first call is made actually by the head of the GSA, General Services Administration, who, by law, can release the funding. It's about $6.5 million right now for the income, if there's an incoming president, and I think there will be. She makes that call. Erin Murphy is her name. She was in the Bush administration. She's a Republican, but was confirmed unanimously, so the Democrats really have had no complaints with her. She has not released the funding yet, and I don't blame her. But very soon she should. She's not waiting on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not going to be in the middle. As I heard Ben Ginsburg's interview, I suspect she's waiting for Chalian in the decision desk to to make the call, just like all of us.
Who isn't? Paul Begala, Clay Johnson, thank you very much for walking us through all of that really Interesting.
Thanks.
Okay, so moments from now, John, we are expecting a new batch of vote counts to come in from Georgia and Pennsylvania. Of course, that could put Joe Biden over the top, so stand by.
All right, this is CNN's special live coverage. Let's take a look at where things stand in the state of Georgia. As of now, Joe Biden leads by 7,000 votes. 16 electoral votes up for grabs. Biden up by 7,000. That grew, relatively speaking, substantially overnight from 4,000 to 7,000. And the size of that lead might play into the ultimate outcome there. So we're watching that very closely. We are still waiting for votes in Georgia. Some of those votes are the military and overseas ballots. CNN anchor Brianna Keeler knows a ton about this and has been following it very, very closely, not just in Georgia, but around the country. But let's start with Georgia. What do we know about this vote, Brianna?
Yeah, let's start with what is new, which is that we know about 900 military and overseas ballots came in by close of business yesterday, which was the deadline in Georgia to receive those. Now, that 900 came in Fulton County, which, yes, is the most populous county. What about the other counties? We don't actually know at this point in time. But you would add those to the 18,008 military and overseas ballots that have already been received and counted in Georgia. These are the ballots of service members, of their spouses and their family members, of other Americans who are overseas. And what we knew as of yesterday afternoon from the Georgia Secretary of State, John, was that there were about 8,400 outstanding ballots. It would be very weird for all of those to have come in. Those were the ballots that were sent out and had not been received back. Some of them would have been in transit. We know that from the 900 that came into Fulton County, but some of them just aren't going to be cast. That's just what happens. In 2016, about 1/3 of the absentee ballots sent out to military and overseas did not come back. They were not cast. So that is not unusual.
And again, it makes up military ballots and overseas ballots, and there's every reason to think that they might behave differently. But people sometimes make assumptions about military ballots. President Trump says they're missing military ballots. There aren't. But he seems to be implying or think in his head that there'll be some huge advantage for him among that group. What do we know about that?
That's right. That might be an outdated assumption. Back in 2000, during the recount in Florida, it was probably a safe assumption, as Republicans wanted military ballots there to be counted, that would favor them. I think that is something that would be accepted looking back by Democrats and Republicans. But there's actually a recent poll by Military Times of active duty military. This is something that was completed in August. It was done in July and August, which I should also note was before the Atlantic piece came out that showed the president had referred to war dead and wounded as suckers and losers. Would that have maybe impacted this? We don't know, but this poll was done before then. And what it showed was actually that active duty service members were trending towards Joe Biden. I know a lot of people maybe aren't putting a ton of faith in the polls right now, but the apples to apples numbers in that Military Times poll showed that from 2016 to 2020, there was an erosion of support for Donald Trump among service members. So he shouldn't bank on the fact that this is something that would help him. But also, there are no missing ballots, just to be clear. That's what I outlined was the outstanding ballots. There are ballots with military folks, with overseas folks, and with regular Americans who vote absentee that they just don't always send everyone back. That would be weird if they did, actually.
Yes, it would. And in terms of military and overseas ballots received after Election Day, what does the law say about this, Brianna?
Well, they are protected. So when President Trump is saying that ballots received after Election Day are illegal, he's actually calling, John, for a scenario where you would have service members and their families and other overseas Americans casting ballots that by law should be counted, but he's saying that they shouldn't. So you could actually have a situation where there are military members who are actively defending a country that they can't vote in if you took what the president said to the bank. Now, that's not what election officials are taking to the bank, because these are protected votes, right? Just like all of our votes are protected. And while Georgia had till close of business for them to come in yesterday, other states are actually giving longer. By law, right? Nevada and Pennsylvania, these votes can come in until Tuesday, November 10th. When you look at North Carolina, it's even longer, Thursday, November 12th. So again, They have to be counted by law, right? They have to be counted.
Your vote counts. Brianna Keilar, really important information. Thank you so much.
Biden is up by more than 22,000 votes in Nevada right now, so we'll take you there live to find out when election voters might finish the count. That's next.
Welcome back to CNN's special live coverage. Let's take a look at the crucial state of Nevada. They are still counting there. 6 electoral votes up for grabs. Joe Biden leading by 22,000 votes. Now, more than 100,000 votes remaining in Nevada. What do we know about them? They mostly come from Clark County, a heavily Democratic area. It's very possible Joe Biden will expand his lead there, but we're still waiting for some new numbers. Allison?
Okay, John, so those are the numbers at the moment. Let's get an update on what's happening on the ground. CNN's Erica Hill is there. So, Erica, tell us the status. What's the timeline?
Hey, good morning. So we will have another update at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. local time here today. We're getting these updates now twice a day from Clark County, which is good news. There had been some grumbling about not getting information quickly enough. So the Secretary of State will update the latest numbers this morning. And then we're going to hear directly from the Clark County Registrar about an hour after that. And then we're going to get a second information dump now here in Clark County that we should have sometime before 7 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Pacific. They're not going to be guessing an exact time on that. What we do know, though, as John pointed out, more than 124,000 ballots that still need to be processed in this state. Just under half of those are mail-in ballots. Remember, every active voter in the state was sent a mail-in ballot this year, and 70% plus of voters in the state of Nevada are right here in Clark County. 90% of all outstanding ballots also here in Clark County, according to the Secretary of State. So we're hoping for some more numbers today on those 58,500 mail ballots that we know of. There are also these same-day registration provisional ballots that need to be processed. So we're looking for some more information on those. Some of them can't start to be processed, though, until all the mail-in ballots are processed. So we're told that in Clark County, mail-in ballots that are in-house should be processed by tomorrow. We know another 241 came in yesterday morning's mail. More can come today. In fact, more ballots can arrive up until Tuesday, November 10th, because here in Nevada, as long as that mail-in ballot was postmarked on Election Day, November 3rd, it can be received until the 10th and then processed. So we're not done yet. That's the short answer in a long way.
We'll stand by to stand by. Erica Hill, thank you very much. Okay. On the other side of your screen, you're watching live pictures out of Pennsylvania. I think we can pull those back up. And Georgia, we have for you. Vote counting is underway for a 5th day, and soon those states are expected to release a new batch of results. Stay with us for CNN's live special coverage.
We're awaiting new results from the crucial presidential battleground of Pennsylvania. Thousands of votes may finally decide this election. I'm Wolf Blitzer. We're back here in the CNN Election Center. Former Vice President Joe Biden says he has no doubt he will win the White House and defeat President Trump. But the numbers aren't quite there yet, but they could be very, very soon. Vote counters are back at work in Pennsylvania, and we expect new vote tallies to drop at any time. We also expect new results from Arizona and Nevada in the hours ahead, but only Pennsylvania could put Biden over the top on its own. Its 20 electoral votes would give him more than the 270 he needs to close the deal. Let's go right to a key race alert. And let's start off in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania, which we're watching oh so closely right now. 20 electoral votes. Joe Biden is ahead by 28,833 votes. He has 49.6% to 49.1% for Donald Trump. 96% of the estimated vote is in. We're also watching Georgia, where 99% of the estimated vote is in. Biden's lead has jumped up a bit to 7,248. He has 49.4%. Trump has 49.3%. In Arizona, which has 11 electoral votes, Biden's lead is close to 30,000, 29,861, 49.6% to 48.6%. In Nevada, 6 electoral votes. Biden maintains a steady lead, 22,657, 49.8% to 48%, 93% of the estimated vote in Nevada is in. Let's walk over to John King, who's watching all this as closely as anyone on earth right now. It's getting closer and closer.
Day 5, good morning. How you doing?
Yeah.
Look, day 5, so you say, why is it taking so long? Well, day 5 could very well, because of Wolf just outlined, be the decisive day. And why is that? Look, here's the national map. Joe Biden building an impressive lead in the popular vote as more are counted. That's a moral victory, an important victory for the Democratic Party. But what Joe Biden needs, as you noted, is just to get over the top. 253 electoral votes. We have not changed that in 2 days as these states count through. But today we do know. Pennsylvania, Wolf noted 28,833. When you see both candidates above 3.3 million votes, just shy of 29,000 votes, does not seem like a big lead. But now we are down to fewer ballots left to count. So what are we waiting for? We're waiting, number one, to see if we get another installment out of Philadelphia right here. Philadelphia and the suburbs still have a modest amount of ballots, but they're counting those modest ballots. Here's the question. We know in the mail-in ballots, Joe Biden has been running up impressive numbers. There are so-called provisional ballots. You want some of those to be reported so you can just match it up. Is the math the same, or is President Trump somehow making up ground? Most unlikely. He's going to make up ground here, but you want to see the votes. We expect some anytime later this morning. Another big important allocation of votes. They've been counting votes out here in Allegheny County. This is Pittsburgh. And again, late last night before we left, we got some votes from here. And again, Joe Biden overwhelmingly winning these late ballots. You want to watch a few more installments here. It's a comfort zone factor. It's a giant state. More than 6.6 million votes count when you added them all up. So you see 28,000. You want a little more evidence that the trajectory is solid. We could get that. Within minutes, but certainly within hours. You also noted, Wolf, I just want to bring this up. Georgia, the Secretary of State yesterday said most likely to head into a recount. So you look at this, 7,248 votes in a state that is 49.4 to 49.3. That's actually quite significant. The Biden lead grew by nearly 3,000 votes overnight, and a recount lawyer will tell you. In a recount, maybe a dozen votes change. Every now and then, 100 or so votes change. When you can add 3,000, if you're going to head into a recount, you're at 7,200 now going up. They would tell you that's quite significant. It makes it much less likely that there would be any change. And again, sometimes there's human error writing something down. It's not about anything nefarious, but you go through, you recheck the votes. Sometimes it doesn't change, maybe 100. A 7,200 vote lead is pretty solid. And then you mentioned, obviously, there's a lot of impatience in the country. We get that. We share it. But they're trying to count votes. So you move out to Arizona, they're still counting votes, a 29,861 vote lead. This is the one state. In Pennsylvania, when they count votes, Joe Biden expands his lead. In Georgia, when they count votes, Joe Biden expands his lead. Out here in the West, the president has made some gains. It's been a little bit of a seesaw. Sometimes Biden does, sometimes the president does. But the president has made gains here. He's cut into a lead that was larger than that at one point. So you want to keep counting the votes. And then Nevada, we expect in a couple of hours more results. You see how close it is, 22,657 statewide. We expect more. This is the decisive county. You see it there. More than 70% of the vote, as much as 75% of the vote when they're all said and done in Nevada will come from Clark County, and we expect more votes today. So if you've been with us the last 5 days, you understand and you're waiting, but we are potentially at that decisive moment, because if we get votes out of Pennsylvania that confirm Biden's lead continues to grow, that would do it. That's enough right there. 273 would make Joe Biden not the Democratic nominee anymore, the Democratic candidate anymore. That would make him president-elect. And then, as we've said, he has the potential, will count for the rest of the day, but we may well know by the end of the day if Joe Biden can get that high, 306 electoral votes. That appears to be his ceiling. That would match the president's total from 4 years ago. But this one here is the one that matters most right here. It's 20 electoral votes. It's the largest prize on the board. And so if you come over here and you just zoom in, that's what we're waiting for. Every vote matters in every state across the country, but this is the state that at any moment could put Joe Biden over the top.
Let's check in with Brian Todd. He's in Pittsburgh for us right now, Allegheny County. Brian, understand votes are about to come in where you are?
Wolf, we expect another batch of vote count to come here probably within the next couple of hours. They're not really giving us a timeline. They just started counting behind me a little over an hour ago here. I'll move to the side here, and our photojournalist Jay McMichael will take you into where the ballot counters are working. They're working on those 29,000 misprinted ballots that came in that they had to correct and mail out back again to voters with the correct information on them. So those came in a little late. So they're working on those. We were told by Rich Fitzgerald, the executive of Allegheny County, that they've got about 20,000 more of those to go through of the 29,000. So that's what they're doing right now. They've been at this pretty much all morning. The observers are here in the foreground. And these, according to Rich Fitzgerald, these ballots will take longer to get through because they have to open the envelopes, they have to check to see if the ballot in question is maybe a duplicate or not. They have to go through some other things on that ballot to make sure it's the correct ballot. Now, these ballots, as we said, had the initial ballots that were mailed out had bad information on them. They had some candidates that were mailed to voters, some candidates that were not really running for office in those districts, so they couldn't vote for those people, but they could vote legitimately for the president. So some of those ballots, they have to check to make sure that the votes that they cast were for the president and not for the incorrect candidates down ballot. So that's one of the issues that they're checking to see if, you know, if the vote coming in is correctly filled out. So it takes time. And we're going to get probably some additional votes maybe in the next couple of hours, Wolf, as we monitor the situation here.
So just remind us, Brian, how many outstanding ballots are there in Allegheny County where you are around Pittsburgh? And are they all mail-in ballots?
Yes, they're almost, just about all of them are mail-in ballots. There are at least 20,000 outstanding ballots in Allegheny County that they have left to count. And they said it might take, you know, into the weekend, but, you know, we hope to get a significant amount of them back within the next couple of hours. Maybe not all of them, because they've been giving them to us, Wolf, in just small batches of a few thousand here or there. So we expect that that will probably happen today. But, you know, by the end of the day, we hope to get, you know, a pretty significant amount of those vote counts in.
Brian Todd, we'll get back to you. Thank you. You know, John, 20,000 ballots in Allegheny County. You can see it's a pretty blue county over there around Pittsburgh. We're going to get those numbers, I suspect, fairly soon. Almost all of them mail-in ballots. And we know that Biden does really well. Trump does not do that well with these mail-in ballots.
Right. You see the overall percentage here, 59 to 39. That's Allegheny County. It's Pittsburgh and the suburbs around it. And you see, if I come back out to the statewide look, you know, President does pretty well, very well, in western Pennsylvania. The city of Pittsburgh itself, blue-collar, labor unions back Biden. So you do see the Democrats winning the city area, the urban area, but the president does all right. But what we have seen consistently is in this county and statewide. You see the president at 39% here in Allegheny County. You see him at 49% when you go statewide. Look, you see all that red. The president has strong support in Pennsylvania, but what we have seen consistently over now the last 3+ days is when they count these mail-in ballots, Joe Biden routinely, disproportionately. You know, his total statewide is 50. He'll get 60, 70, sometimes more than 80% if we're talking about southeast Pennsylvania here. Out here last night when Brian Todd and the executive out there were bringing us votes, Joe Biden was consistently above 60 and 70% in the mail-in ballot counts. Why? Democrats voted by mail in this unorthodox, unprecedented pandemic election. Republicans tended to turn out much more on Election Day. So what is left to count tells you, we know it favors Biden because that's how Democrats voted, not just in Pennsylvania, but across America. So when you have more than 6.6 million cast and a 28,833 vote lead, what we're looking for is just proof that this trajectory, slow build continues, because it will be a narrow victory. But for anyone out there saying, wow, you know, the president carried the state by 40,000 votes 4 years ago. It's a very competitive state. The president did a good job. He got more votes this time than he did last time. The Democrats have just done a better job, and they're inching up to the finish line, Wolf, as we come. And again, Brian says those could come any minute. It's going to move the state up for you here. We also know, as I said, right here, it's this, you know, if you look at the size of Pennsylvania, you think this is the tiny southeast corner. This is the population center. Democrats need to run it up here. And if you go through these counties, you start first in the city of Philadelphia. Sorry about that. I went across the line here. You come here, you start in the city of Philadelphia, and you come out. Look at that, 81%. And in the mail-in ballots, it's been higher than that. You come up to Bucks County. It's the more competitive of the counties, suburban collar counties. But in the mail-in ballots, Joe Biden has been well ahead of that. So we have a couple hundred here, a couple thousand there. They're going to start to come in this morning. Joe Biden inching closer to a decisive moment. And again, this would be fitting for Joe Biden. It would be poetic in some ways. He was born in the state, number one. And number two, when he announced his candidacy, he said his mission. He believed he was the strongest Democrat to take Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin back. He's got 2 of the 3 prizes. If he gets the 3rd, he's president.
They retain Minnesota as well. Kate Baldwin's in Philadelphia for us, watching all this unfold. So, Kate, what are you hearing about Philadelphia? That's the largest batch of votes potentially out there.
That's exactly right. And we have just received an update on timing. I'm having a mixed minus issue, guys, so I'm going to take this out of my ear. We're just got an update on timing and amount. We are told by sources that we should expect between 2,000 and 3,000 votes to be counted and updated to the system soon. One source telling us by noon, another source saying it could be more like early afternoon. And as we have seen throughout this process, Wolf, that the timing of uploading and finalizing, getting these votes into the system and counted, the timing can slip. There are a lot of factors that go into getting it from the beginning to the end, and so the timing can slip. But importantly, especially on this day, with 20,000 mail-in votes left outstanding here in Philadelphia, at least the first update of the day will be coming soon. 2,000 to 3,000 is what we're told by sources. One source saying by noon Eastern, another saying it could be early afternoon. And this very possibly is not the final update from the day. We know they're getting through these ballots. They're beginning that review process that is a slower, more labor-intensive process, but they're definitely up and running now. Wolf?
All right, thanks very much, Kate. Let's talk about that in Philadelphia right now. And in Philadelphia, you see how Biden has 80.8%, Trump has 18.3%. Potentially, if these mail-in ballots come in Philadelphia, he might wind up Biden getting 70, 80, maybe 85% of those ballots.
You're exactly right, because he has consistently exceeded the numbers in any county, even in the red counties where President Trump is winning. You look at Joe Biden's number, then they count the mail-in ballots, and with one or two exceptions, as we've gone through this dozens of times over the last 3 days, Joe Biden exceeds that number, matches it or exceeds it. So 80%, 81%, if you round up in Philadelphia. We have had reports, installments of votes come in, where he's getting 87% and higher. And so that's the key point. So Kate Baldwin just mentioned 20,000 votes outstanding here in the city of Philadelphia. It's the number one population center in the state by far. So you get 2,000 to 3,000 of those. There's 20,000 out. You get 2,000 to 3,000 of those. So it's 10% or more, maybe, of what they have left, right? And so Democrats are asking, why haven't you called this race, right? It's 3.3 million votes, 3.3 million votes. Joe Biden said 28,800. You think about a universe of roughly 100,000 left. If Joe Biden gets above 30,000, starts to build beyond that, then you feel more comfortable, because you've seen out here in the western part of the state, then a new installment here in the southeastern part of the state. Joe Biden getting 60, 70, 80% or more of those votes. At some point, the trajectory gets you past any probability that the President of the United States is going to come back. And for those who say, well, you're already at that point, the President is attacking this process, right? That's not how we have our own rules. We have our own process. But especially when the process is under attack, sticking to the rules, using your building blocks, methodically getting to the finish line, and being cautious is a great way to do it. If they start bringing in some more votes, we will know the outcome in Pennsylvania, perhaps sometime today. But we completely get the frustration and the anticipation out there. It's just important to have rules and not bend them, especially at a time the integrity of the system is being unfairly attacked by the candidate who, if he loses this state, is a one-term president.
Yeah. All right, we're watching this and we're embracing for more numbers coming in fairly soon. Let's check in with Jake to see what else is going on. Jake?
Thanks, Wolf, and hello, world. We're back again, day 5 of election night in America, and we do think that there will be some resolution today. We do think that there will be some indication of what the future will bring for the United States. As you note there, you see on the side of the screen, there are 4 states. The margins in Georgia are getting better for Biden. The margin in Nevada is getting better for Biden. The margin in Pennsylvania is getting better for Biden. And in Arizona, actually, it's gotten a little bit worse for Biden, a little bit better for President Trump. Let's check in with the campaigns right now. Jeff Zeleny is covering the Biden campaign. He's in Wilmington, Delaware. And Jeff, a lot of impatient Democrats out there, understandably so. How is former Vice President Biden doing?
Well, Jake, good morning. I'm told by talking to a variety of Democrats, Joe Biden is actually very patient. He's very calm, much more so than some of his supporters and donors and others who are growing impatient about this. But I am told that the former vice president is looking forward. He believes that victory is at hand, and he believes, and his advisors believe, it will happen at some point during the coming hours or sometime today. But he is looking forward, specifically focusing on the challenges ahead of coronavirus. He is going to move forward through his transition. I'm told he's not going to be deciding on any members of the cabinet for a few weeks, but he will be focusing on coronavirus, and look for some type of announcement on that to come in the very soon hours or days after he declares victory, which he expects to do at some point. And it is because of these rising challenges, the rising numbers. As we've been talking about election numbers, of course, he's been getting briefings every day, sometimes a few times a day, on the rising cases of coronavirus. So I'm told he's going to put in place some type of a Biden COVID-19 task force like the one we saw in the White House, which we've not seen for days or weeks. So that is what his focus is on, even as Democrats, of course, around him are waiting for that victory speech. The stage, as you can see, Jake, you've seen all week, is still set up behind me here. It is the anticipation that they would still use it for some type of a victory speech. But as this goes on further, the reality and the challenges here are the important moments. So do these fireworks still seem appropriate given the deaths in coronavirus cases? That is something that the Biden team is talking about. But the transition, even though it's not being talked about, is well underway behind the scenes, Jake.
If, in fact, he wins, he will have a lot of work to do, especially when it comes to rebuilding the economy and trying to contain the coronavirus. Jeff Zeleny, thank you so much for that update. Let's go now to the White House, where we find Jim Acosta, who's been covering the Trump White House and the Trump campaign. And Jim, there has been this mad scramble by Trump and his supporters to try to find evidence, try to find any reason why the ballots and the vote counting should be questioned. I have not seen anything. Have they found anything even remotely credible yet?
Not yet, Jake, and I will tell you, I just spoke with a Trump advisor about this just a short while ago, and as the president is tweeting all of these unfounded rumors and baseless accusations, a pretty stunning admission from one Trump advisor I'm speaking with, and this person is saying, we have found nothing concrete, quote, nothing concrete in terms of allegations of voter fraud. I think that is significant, Jake, because as the president is saying these things publicly, there are people inside the campaign, inside Trump world, Republicans up on Capitol Hill, Republican operatives that I speak with, they are all telling me the same thing, that the president is making baseless allegations about voter fraud that at this point simply don't exist. And so even though the president is flailing at this point and wanting this thing to be dragged out, it doesn't sound like they have anything in terms of hard evidence that would, hold up in any kind of courtroom or anywhere for that matter. And so this is just the president, I think, at the end of the game, trying to cry foul, try to complain about the refs, complain about the officials as much as possible to see how long he can drag it out. We should point out, just a short while ago, he did leave in his motorcade from the White House. We suspect he may be heading off to the golf course, which I suppose there are going to be officials inside the campaign and so on who are going to be relieved if they can somehow separate him from his smartphone for a brief period of time, because obviously, there are people inside the campaign who just feel like he's making matters worse. And on top of all of that, Jake, we should point out, this White House is once again looking like a hot zone for the coronavirus. More cases of the coronavirus were discovered overnight, including the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. That's something else that we're tracking over here, in addition to, what is going to happen with the resolution of this election, is whether or not it's even safe to work inside the White House, which is sort of an incredible commentary on where we are right now, Jake.
Yeah, this would be like something like the third or fourth outbreak in the White House of the coronavirus. They're not exactly sticklers when it comes to wearing masks, I think it's fair to say. Jim Acosta,
Really
thanks so much.
That's right.
Appreciate it. We're going to come back to you as matters develop. It's sad to see the president tweeting these lies, one after the other. But at this point, frankly, it's almost irrelevant. We're at the point now where one of these states, data is going to come in, and we're going to be able to call it. And there's not one of those states trending red right now.
Right. I agree. The only thing it is relevant to, or the only people, those tweets which are lies about things we won't even talk about, are people who, the tens of millions of people who read his tweets and believe what he says. And, we've lived through this kind of alternate universe for 5 years now. But when we're talking about one of the basic tenets of democracy, which is the peaceful transition of power, it's this is the transition period, or as one of his advisors told me yesterday, his grieving period, and he'll get to the other side when the numbers become more clear, because the people who listen to him have to be brought along to the notion that this was not illegitimate, that this was not laden with fraud, that this was done appropriately.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the president needs to bring his people along to get to that conclusion. What he is doing right now is not helping. It's hurting that process. And there, at some point, will need to be, as you've said repeatedly, a real intervention from Republican leaders with this president about what's going on. But I think people might be confused as to why that hasn't happened yet. And I think the answer is pretty simple. This is still Donald Trump's Republican Party, whether he is reelected or not. And Republicans in Washington, some of whom were just reelected to their offices, some of whom are facing reelection the next 2 years or 4 years, they know that they will need the president's supporters. Yep. And so there is a fear, a real fear in Washington right now about how to handle this, how not to alienate these people, and what will happen if President Trump is not reelected and he's no longer on the ballot to help them out, to bring these people out to the polls. So that's what, you know, you talk about a grieving period. There's a grieving period happening for the rest of Washington as well on the Republican side. But at some point, the fate of the country has to come before that. And I do think it will. It's just a matter of time.
There's you see some of that in statements from Republican leaders, the more sane ones, like Senator Mitt Romney or Congressman Adam Kinzinger, people who understand that maybe the fat lady hasn't sung, but she is sure clearing her throat. And the idea that it's time to start praising President Trump's accomplishments. The Republican Party had a fantastic night, other than at the top of the ticket. They picked up seats in the House. As of right now, they've held on to the Senate. They've held on to all their legislatures, et cetera. President Trump has a number of accomplishments that Republicans can be proud of when it comes to Supreme Court justices, when it comes to tax cuts, when it comes to deregulation, when it comes to criminal justice reform. It is time for Republicans to start praising Caesar and preparing to bury him, both, because it is very clear what is going on. Yeah. It is not helpful, as you note, that there are Republicans competing for the MAGA voters who are ginning up and following Republicans, by the way, who know better.
Yes.
Like Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Lindsey Graham, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, people who know better, who know that there is no evidence of fraud.
That's exactly right.
And it's time for them to come back to planet Earth. It looks as though the Trump era is in its last throes. I mean, anything could happen, I suppose, but it certainly looks that way. And it's time for them to start doing what's best for not just the country, but also themselves.
So I agree with you that the Trump era might be coming to a close now, but the Trump grip on the Republican Party is nowhere near over. And that is the calculation that those lawmakers have been making for a long time. And look, I mean, there's already open speculation, informed speculation, that if, in fact, the numbers continue to go where they go and the president is a one-term president, the first since George H.W. Bush, that he will run again in 2024. I mean, that is not a wild thought, because that is something that he, is talking about. Maybe he's joking, maybe he's not, but we can obviously see that happening. And so that is the reality that these Republicans are living in right now.
Don't go anywhere. We are waiting for new numbers, votes from Pennsylvania that could put Joe Biden over the top and into the White House. Stay with us. Our special coverage continues next.
Welcome back. We're watching 4 key battlegrounds right now, and they are Georgia. Biden is ahead there by 7,248 votes. Nevada, Biden is ahead there by 22,657 votes. Pennsylvania, Biden is ahead there by 28,833 votes. Arizona, Biden is ahead there by 29,861 votes. 4 key battlegrounds. Pamela Brown, you're at the CNN voting desk. Where are the outstanding votes right now, especially in Pennsylvania?
Well, there are 4 key states that we're looking at, Wolf, as you well know. And this morning, we could be getting the release of data from these mail-in ballots in some of these states that could put Joe Biden over the edge. And we're looking at Pennsylvania first. We're starting there because that is the state that could do it this morning. It has 76,000 ballots outstanding, 101,000 provisional ballots. Philadelphia, we're expecting to release more results this morning, perhaps, as we have reporting that they could release up to 3,000 by noon. Now in Georgia, looking there, approximately 12,770 provisional ballots there in Georgia, up to 8,400 overseas and military ballots. Now, I want to mention that these are ballots that were sent out, but we don't know the number that has actually been returned there in Georgia, and we know the deadline for that was on Friday. There's also counting underway right now in Gwinnett County, right outside of Atlanta, another Democratic stronghold. In Arizona, we're also expecting an update there, and its largest county, Maricopa. It has 126,000 ballots altogether in Arizona, 47,000 provisional ballots. So we'll wait for that update for Maricopa. That's an important one there in Arizona. And finally, you have Nevada, what we're keeping a close eye on. 124,500 ballots there, 60,000 provisional ballots, and we are expecting an important update from Clark County at 12 p.m. Eastern time. That, again, is another important county there in Nevada, the home of Las Vegas. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. But really, right now, so much attention is on Pennsylvania, Wolf.
Certainly is. All right, Pamela, we'll get back to you. You know, John, if Biden were to win all 4 of these contests that we just discussed, he would wind up with 306 electoral votes, which is exactly the same number that Trump won 4 years ago, 306 electoral votes. He won Pennsylvania by about, what, 44,000 votes? Right. Yeah, he called that a landslide 4 years ago. But it would be intriguing that if he wins all 4, Biden, 306, Trump won 306 4 years ago.
Right, and you're remaking the map, and that's the political statement a President Biden would like to make. This is Pennsylvania. We're waiting for this to come in. As Pam just noted, could be any minute. More votes out of Pittsburgh, more votes out of Philadelphia. That could get you to the decisive point. But to your point, Wolf, number one, Joe Biden believes that as a statement. More votes than any candidate for president in the history of the United States of America. That's likely to go over 75 million. The president is number 2. So Dana made this point earlier. His grip on the Republican Party, he may well lose the White House, and he may well know that within a matter of hours. Donald Trump can say, I got 70 million votes. I still have a grip over this party. It's the Trump party. It's not the Republican Party anymore. And that will be a dynamic that continues even if Donald Trump has to leave the White House. But to Joe Biden's point, 75 million votes. Last night he said he thinks he has a mandate to govern. Look, the Republicans may still control the Senate. We don't know that yet. 2 runoffs in the state of Georgia. 2 runoffs there to control the balance of power. Still an evenly divided country if you look at the House elections, you look at the Senate elections. So how does Joe Biden make that case? Well, number one, to Democrats, he says, I'm your leader because I did what I said I would do. I said I would flip Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania back, and we're still waiting on the final one there. But if he's successful, he can say, this is why I ran. I was right. That helps in politics. It's very important when you're trying to sway people over, reach compromise, get some people, say progressives, who want him to be more ambitious and more bold on climate change and other issues, to get them to be more patient and to take his way. This would be another statement, as would this. When you're a new president, you want to be able to get in the room with the Republicans, who will still have a lot of power, and say, the American people just told you to listen to me. That has been a Republican state. Not since Bill Clinton in 1992 has a Democrat carried it for president. That has been a Republican state. Not since Bill Clinton in 1996, in an election running against Bob Dole and Ross Perot, has a Democrat carried that. So it gives you some political leverage to go into the room and tell Republicans, your voters are turning on you. You should listen to me. Now, that doesn't mean it works. Washington is an incredibly polarized place, but it gives Biden some leverage as he goes into it. And that's the point he's trying to make as he remakes this map a bit. Not a fundamental wow change in the map, but an important change in the map. This gives him credibility with Democrats. This gives him a little bit more credibility with Republicans. Just one perspective, Wolf. I always look at this, and Democrats get mad at me when I do this, but I like to show this because the polarization of America is going nowhere. Joe Biden may well, by the end of this day, have a very impressive win for the presidency. But just like Barack Obama and just like Donald Trump, he will become president of a very divided country. You see all this red. That's how America voted by county. Now, Democrats at home are already saying, nobody lives here. They're right. These are less populous counties, but these states still get 2 senators, right? And those senators, overwhelmingly from this part of the country, are Republicans. That's what complicates the politics. This is the fight over the Senate. This is the fight over the Electoral College. This is the fight over should you have the filibuster. I get it. All those fights will be waiting for the new president. But if you look at the map, you see Democrats incredibly strong on the coasts, incredibly strong on the coast. That's why when you come out of this, that's why this is significant to Joe Biden. To get a win in Georgia, to pick up in Arizona, would give him some more leverage. How much? That's what the next 100 days, the first 100 days of the administration would teach us. But this map, it tells us red and blue. It also tells us a lot that America is still in a tug-of-war, and the politics are still evenly divided. But again, if you can, that's a statement. That's a statement. You set out on day one saying that's what I would do. If on the decisive day you can prove you did it, that matters in politics. It gives you credibility.
And we heard Biden say last night, one of the major thrusts of his speech, he wants to unite the country now, try to bring the country together, assuming he becomes president of the United States.
Just quickly, that's a fascinating dynamic because we do know, let's assume Mitch McConnell stays as the majority leader. Again, there will be two runoffs in the state of Georgia that could well determine
runoffs for the Senate.
For the Senate, whether the Democrats get 50 and then Kamala Harris would break the tie as vice president. We don't know that yet, and we might not know that until the middle of January. Joe Biden does have a relationship of trust with Mitch McConnell. I'm not saying they're friends. I'm not saying they agree on much. But during the Obama administration, when they were cutting deals with McConnell, Biden's word was good, in the sense that if Mitch McConnell gave Biden his word, he trusted him, and if Biden gave Mitch McConnell his word, he trusted him. That was a long time ago. You say it's only 4 years ago, right? It seems like a very long time ago and how Washington has changed. But there are little things. The question is, again, to that point, so Biden has a relationship of trust, not policy agreement, but trust with McConnell to cut compromises, which is what Biden says he wants to do. How much leverage does Mitch McConnell have to do that when he got 70 million votes? And even if he's gone from the White House, any of you been on social media? He has a Twitter presence. He has other ways of making clear what he wants Republicans to do. So today could be a decisive day in the presidential race. It also will turn the page to what will be a fascinating new chapter in politics.
We're expecting, John, a bunch of votes to come in from Arizona fairly soon. Bill Weir is in Phoenix for us right now. So, Bill, what's the latest over there? What are you hearing?
Well, they're at their places here in Maricopa County as we expect a new set of numbers in less than half an hour here today. And there will be two big number dumps today, and that'll pretty much make it all over but the shouting. We have seen since the Associated Press called this state, Joe Biden's lead eroded by more than half as these counties like Navajo and Yuma and Cochise and Yavapai, John McCain country, start to give the president more and more votes. Last night, he picked up another 7,000 here in Maricopa. But of course, the two biggest counties are the last to finish voting, and that is Maricopa, that is Pima County. And this election, of course, in Arizona is thrown upside down by the president's own behavior. Typically, because so many people here vote absentee, Republicans would get their ballots in earlier. They verify those signatures, so those get counted first. And then Democrats would wait till the last minute, get them in, and you'd see a blue surge at the end, the way we're seeing around the country. This year, because the president, injected so much doubt into the mail, we don't know what these last ballots are going to bring us here. And so it could go down, if Joe Biden holds on to Arizona, as the biggest example of sort of political self-sabotage ever.
All right, Bill Weir, we'll stay in very close touch with you as well. We'll get those numbers coming in, we assume, in about a half an hour. John, stand by. We're expecting also lots of results. Thousands of ballots in Pennsylvania could be coming in very soon, and that could decide the race for the White House. Our special coverage continues right after this.
And welcome back. We continue to watch the votes being counted. We anticipate getting more numbers in very shortly. And perhaps some form of resolution shortly as well. There you see the numbers in Georgia, 7,000 lead by Biden, but it is Pennsylvania where so many eyes are on and where we have been seeing Vice President Biden's lead just increasing hour by hour over the last several days. Gloria, if it is Pennsylvania that gives Joe Biden the presidency, there would be some certainly significance for the Biden family in that. First of all, today, November 7th, in 1972, Joe Biden was elected to the Senate for the first time.
At the age of 29.
48 years ago today. So there's certainly for Joe Biden, there would be relevance in that. And as John mentioned, Pennsylvania is the state that got him there. It's the state that he was born in. There's a lot of memories for him there. It's the state that launched his campaign for the presidency. And he really framed this race as a battle between Scranton and Park Avenue.
He did. You know, he was born there, and his family was forced to leave Scranton because his father lost his job. and the family moved to Wilmington, and eventually, but you know, he sees Scranton as his home, and he is a son of Wilmington, obviously a senator from the state of Pennsylvania, but very close. I mean, from the state of from the state of Delaware, but he feels very close to both states, and I think for him, it is where he believes his values come from, that he is the son of somebody who struggled financially. They lived in this very modest house with his aunts, his uncles, you know, his mom, dad, brothers, sisters, and that is where he says he was born politically to a degree, and it is why he says he believes in what he believes and has, as you say, framed the campaign as someone who understands Main Street against somebody who understands Park Avenue.
And the argument that Biden will make and has already said is that he has rebuilt the blue wall.
Yeah, look, I think there's something to that. I've been thinking the last few days, and this will irritate some Democrats, but could another Democrat have done what he did here? I think it's very questionable. He did have reach into to voters and areas that perhaps other Democrats didn't, particularly in the industrial Midwest. And I'm reminded of the fact that one of the many reasons that Barack Obama chose him in 2008 was because there was this recognition. We just parked him in those states because he knew how to talk to folks there. He felt culturally akin to them. So, you know, I think he has a real claim to that. The question for the party is what happens post-Biden. But right now, he was the right guy to put this back together.
His complaint about Hillary Clinton's campaign was that she didn't campaign in those states enough that you're talking about, and that's why.
But it's not just that she didn't campaign there; she really didn't connect there.
That's right.
And Biden culturally connected with constituencies that she did not. He obviously got mamboed in these rural areas, but he did get 8% more than Hillary Clinton did among white non-college voters, and he ran up the score in suburban areas where his moderation was actually a plus with independent voters.
Is mamboed one of those political science terms?
It's a political word. It's a political word. I'll send you the whole dictionary.
Okay. Is that like, anyway. For Pennsylvania, I mean, you yesterday were talking about the numbers in Pennsylvania and looking at them, and I know you continue to look at the numbers coming in, and what does that tell you about these allegations?
Well, I'm looking at it, candidly, I'm looking at it for evidence. Is there any monkey business going on to see if there's something that sort of sticks out that, you know, that they stacked the vote or there's any anomalies.
Which is what the allegations being made by Ruth.
The allegations, but yeah, so if we're going to make those allegations, obviously you have to prove them with facts, but also it's good to look at what do the numbers show, that if there are anomalies in the numbers that show that that's the case. And so I was just looking at them, and because we're getting these from Allegheny County, Joe Biden is doing 2.5% better than Hillary Clinton in Allegheny County. Now you'd say, wow, I mean, you know, that's Western Pennsylvania, and it must be the city of Pittsburgh. But in a suburban county next to Westmoreland, which is Trump country, big number, he's doing 2.5% better there too. You go north, his last big rally was in Butler County, which is where I lived most of my childhood. He's doing 3% better in Butler County than Hillary Clinton. You go to Washington County, which is south, again, Trump country. He's doing 2% better. Beaver County is only doing 1% better, but the idea is he's doing better everywhere down there, and Allegheny County is not an anomaly. And so, again, if you're looking for fraud, you'd have to look at, well, where are they moving numbers sufficiently that would look outside what the norm is? And again, I don't see it.
The numbers don't show it.
Doesn't mean it's not happening. Yeah. And then on the other side of the state, so that's southwestern Pennsylvania, southeastern Pennsylvania, which is Biden country, he's done 7% better in Chester County, which is a wealthy primarily a wealthy suburban county. Montgomery County, 5% better. Delaware County, 4% better. Bucks County, 5% better. Wow. Philadelphia, where the fraud is supposedly taking place, he's doing 4.5% worse than Hillary Clinton.
That's crazy.
And in the suburban counties, the vote is up 10 to 12%. In Philadelphia County, it's only up 3%. So again, if you're looking at, well, I know these are a lot of numbers, and maybe I'm not explaining it well, but I guess
no, it's interesting.
It shows to me that in the areas that you would expect the fraud to occur, the big cities, you don't really see it. You see Philadelphia, actually, Trump did better, and the machine didn't crank out their vote like the rest of us.
You know, David raised the question of could any other Democrat have done what Joe Biden did in Pennsylvania? You know the state well. What do you think?
Look, I campaigned for George Bush. I was the chairman of his committee in 2004. And look, I've run a lot of campaigns in Pennsylvania. I've never seen, including my own, I've never seen a better campaign in the state up until that point. We did everything right, and he lost. And the reason he lost is, I hate to say it, a Texas oil man never quite connected. And I would make the argument that that was true for Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. She never connected to the middle of, the swing voter in Pennsylvania, the lunch bucket voter. Donald Trump connected and did really, really well there 4 years ago. He still connected. He did really, really well there, but Joe Biden connected enough. I lost a race in 2006 to a guy, I don't know where you're doing this because I'm on the network, but if you're having him on a lot, Bob Casey, I lost him. And the reason I lost him is because I ran against liberals in the past, and I was able to beat liberals because that's not Pennsylvania. And in the case of Bob Casey, he connected because he was from a Casey family.
And Biden did that as well.
Yeah, and so Biden is of that same image, and that's why I think he did well there.
All eyes on Pennsylvania this morning as we await results from thousands more ballots. It could propel Joe Biden to the White House. Our special coverage continues right after this.